Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Evil Sailing Group. My crew is from another world. Chapter 41. Boom, echoed with a loud bang. The door of the room where Tabor and the others were located was violently kicked open by the hungry wolf. Immediately afterwards, Jang J, holding a fishing rod, took the lead into the room. Hungry Wolf, Cypher et al. Followed. After a while, Jang J and others blocked the exit of the room. The atmosphere of the whole room also became dignified with the arrival of Jang J and others. After the sudden astonishment, Tabor also calmed down, and even his face became gloomy. I didn't expect to be discovered by you. I wanted to let you live an extra night. Well, it doesn't matter, the result will be the same sooner or later. After all, Tabor's proud head raised slightly. Listening to Tabor's swearing words, the smile on Jang J's face grew stronger. That's interesting, I don't even want to kill you after hearing that. I'll raise you as a pig, but the materials don't seem to be enough. As soon as Jang J finished speaking, the grumpy Ferguson took a steep step. He snorted coldly at Jang J with a look of disdain. HMPH, hostage, you have a pretty good idea. Let us pirates with a bounty of more than 10 million Baileys drive you like an animal with a bounty of 6 million Baileys. Do you think this is playing tricks? Do you really think that you are the captain, and no matter who boards your boat, you have to listen to you? Hearing Ferguson's words, the hungry wolf couldn't contain his anger immediately. Scum, are you in such a hurry to die? While talking, the hungry wolf has already taken a step. But before he could take a few steps, he was stopped by Jang J raising his hand. Don't be so impetuous. Getting angry with a weak person is a very cheap thing. The hungry wolf turned around in astonishment. But Jang J was looking at him with a kind face and a smile on his face. The other side, Luchini looked at the smile on Jang J's face. I don't know why, I just feel a chill in my heart. Obviously, it looks like such a kind smiling face, but at this moment, Luchini feels that it is so creepy. His body trembled uncontrollably. Luchini's face turned pale, and she couldn't hide the fear in her heart and took 2 steps back. However, just as she moved her feet, she suddenly became weak and fell to her knees. Thump, the muffled sound suddenly spread to every corner of the room. Luchini just knelt down towards Jang J. Did not get up immediately. On the contrary, Luchini just couldn't afford to kneel. Her sixth sense is telling her, if you kneel, you can live. Unprecedented fear and anxiety enveloped Luchini's body and mind. It made her body tremble violently like chaff. Just, for the kneeling Luchini. Jang J didn't even look at him. Ferguson, who was on the side, saw that Luchini knelt down to Jang J without saying a word. He also snorted in displeasure. HMPH, you're such an idiot, kneeling down to a brat, I think you'd better go ashore and become the housewife. After beating Luchini, Ferguson pointed the finger at Jang J again and sneered. I'm insulting you, but you can still laugh, what a clown. His eyes moved away from the hungry wolf. Jang J glanced at Tabor and the others. Then his eyes fell on Ferguson, and he smiled. Didn't you say you were going to tear me into pieces? Come on, I'll just stand here. Hearing that Jang J was about to die, he was still so rampant. Ferguson's veins burst from anger immediately. Stinky boy, since you want to die so much, I'll make you happy. After all, Ferguson rushed towards Jang J directly. But in a moment, Ferguson had already rushed to Jang J. He clenched his fist and punched Jang J with his whole fist. Shoo! It was also the moment when Ferguson threw his fist. Jang J also moved, clenched right fist. In that flash of lightning, Jang J had already swung his fist violently and punched Ferguson on the cheek. Boom, boom, just one punch. Jang J directly beat Ferguson's head and embedded it on the wooden floor. Boom. Facing this sudden scene, Tabor's pupils shrank suddenly, and subconsciously took a breath. How did this happen? Ferguson. Was solved by such a brat. Tabor was horrified. Looking at Ferguson, whose head was embedded in the floor by Jang J's punch, he looked in disbelief. But soon he realized something was wrong. Just watched Ferguson get knocked down by Jang J. I actually ignored it, I didn't even see the punch that Jang J just swung. The awakened Tabor gradually panicked. No way, I couldn't see the action of that brat. This must be my eyesight. Tabor comforted himself in his heart. But how can I deceive myself? Jara and Augustus are on the other side. After seeing Ferguson being knocked out by Jang J's punch, he subconsciously held his breath, and his words trembled in shock. Are you kidding me? Ferguson, who offered a bounty of 13 million pele, was dealt with one punch. Also the same moment, a powerful and terrifying aura suddenly leaked out from Jang J's body. Boom! The powerful pressure of the breath enveloped Tabor and the others in an instant. It made them hang their heads and bend their waists on the spot. It was as if the weight of the body was heavy, pressing down on a mountain, and it was about to suffocate. Instinctively, they looked up with difficulty. Immediately afterwards, they discovered that the kind smile on Jang J's face had disappeared. Instead, it was that indifferent face with a hint of anger. Ferguson today, after receiving a heavy punch from Jang J, he immediately lost the ability to resist. His head was embedded in the floor. For the first time, there was fear in the eyes that looked at Jang J. No, a hoarse voice came from Ferguson's mouth, and his body trembled uncontrollably. But Jang J didn't care about it at all, even in the face of Ferguson who has lost the ability to resist. Jang J didn't intend to stop at all. I saw him grabbing Ferguson's collar with one hand and clenching his fist tightly with the other. No nonsense. With a wave of his hand, he punched Ferguson's head one after another. Bang, 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 bang. He punched more than 10 times in a row. Every punch was splattered with this bright red blood. Eventually, even the sound of the blows changed. It's like hitting rotten meat. Crack, crack. Looking at the scene of blood and flesh splattering, Luchini, who was standing aside, was terrified. At this time, her face had already lost all color. The strong fear made her dare not make a sound. Trembling just like that, like Jang J prostrating and kneeling on the ground. And the hungry wolf behind. Seeing this scene in front of him, he couldn't help being stunned. The captain is angry. Didn't he just say that because such a weak person is very angry? Obito glanced sideways at Hungry Wolf and thought for a while. Perhaps what the captain means is that you can be angry, but don't show it. After all, the expression of emotions will make people reveal their flaws, especially anger. So the more angry you are, the more calm you must be. Hungry Wolf blinked. Is the captain going to kill him directly? Obito shook his head slightly. It's not that easy for him to want to die. The captain has kept his strength in these dozen punches. It is also this time. Jang J stopped his attack on Ferguson. But it wasn't because Ferguson was dead. On the contrary, the reason why Jang J stopped was because he was afraid of killing Ferguson directly. Looking at Ferguson, who was only breathless, his head was bloody and his whole body was twitching. Jang J took his clothes and wiped his fist that was still bleeding. If you are told to come, you will come. If you say you are fat, do you really have a gasp? It seems that you have not counted how much you have for yourself. Jang J looked down at Ferguson, talking indifferently. After wiping the blood on the peak of the fist, Jang J picked up Ferguson's body and shouted while turning his head to look backward. Worry too, Otoko Yuta. Captain. Jang J threw Ferguson out of his hand and said at the same time. Don't let him die so easily. Looking at Ferguson being thrown, Yijiu Yutai took 2 steps forward and caught it easily. Clear. The Hungry Wolf walked out suddenly and began to ask. Leave this to me, Captain. I will definitely make him regret coming to this world. Jang J looked at the Hungry Wolf and smiled. It's up to you. Understood. Hungry Wolf replied, and walked out of the room with Yijiu Yutai, who was carrying Ferguson. There was an explanation for Ferguson's execution. Jang J moved his arms a little, and stroked his somewhat messy hair. Then he turned his head to look at Tabor and the others, and said indifferently. Then, it's your turn. With that said, Jang J stepped towards Tabor. Look at Jang J, who is so ruthless. Tabor also only felt a chill in his heart. But he also understood that if he wanted to survive, he had to show weakness and surrender. The only way to survive is to defeat and kill Jang J. It's just a brat. What's there to be afraid of? Tabor clenched his fists, giving himself a boost of morale. In the next second, he rushed directly towards Jang J. Whoosh! But Jang J didn't seem to have the idea of quarreling with him. The moment Tabor left, the long knife hanging from Jang J's waist suddenly came out half an inch from its sheath. Clang! The crisp sound of the blade being unsheathed echoed in the room. In the next moment, several cold lights flashed past. Swish, swish, swish. Tabor was dismembered on the spot, and his limbs were chopped off by Jang J. Puff. The two arms were sprayed with bright red blood, and Tabor's body fell from midair to the ground together. Thump. Shish. The dark red blood is still spraying like a fountain. Tabor lost limbs and briefly lost consciousness, lying on the ground blankly. He didn't even realize what had happened. I just saw a flash of cold light, then lost all feeling in my limbs, and then my body suddenly lost weight and fell to the ground. It was only after a second or two that he realized in horror that his limbs were cut off by the other party. The intense pain reached Tabor's brain. This made Tabor's eyes widen, and he wailed in pain. Ah! However, Tabor's wailing had only just sounded. Jang J casually picked up the arm that was cut off by him, and stuffed it into Tabor's mouth. Boom! Woo woo woo! Tabor's mouth was broken by his own arm, but his voice was well blocked. I'll deal with you later, now you lie down quietly for a while. Instead of looking at Tabor, Jang J went straight to Jara and Augustus. At this time, Gro and Augustus had already been terrified physically and mentally by the scene in front of them. Flop, flop, without the slightest hesitation, the two of them knelt down directly, crying and begging. We don't want this, it's Tabor. It's Tabor and Ferguson who threatened us. Yes, they forced us. Before the two could finish speaking, Jang J squatted down in front of them. Stop pretending, I listened to your two conversations where you wanted to rebel. Jang J confessed directly, and the two of them were so frightened that they broke into cold sweats, as if falling into an ice cave. Fear, that comes from the boundless fear deep in my heart. The fear of facing death enveloped the two of them, causing their bodies to tremble violently like chaff. Let us go just once. Just this time, we don't dare anymore. We will definitely work hard in the future, and we will do whatever you ask us to do in the future, without any second thoughts. If there are still people who dare to have rebellious thoughts, we will be the first to kill him, and we don't need to bother you. So, please give me another chance. Please. Gro and Augustus were trembling, their voices were hoarse and weeping. At this time, a smile appeared on Jang J's face again. He patted the shoulders of the two of them lightly, speaking kindly. Well, since you have admitted your mistakes so sincerely, then I forgive you. Clean up the bloodline here before tomorrow morning. If you can't even clean up this point, then it's useless for me to ask you. As soon as I heard Jang J, I had to forgive myself, and the punishment was nothing more than cleaning. The two immediately showed joy and agreed again and again. Definitely, we will definitely clean it up. Yes, please rest assured, we will clean this place spotlessly, like new. Seeing the two people's faces beaming with joy, Jang J also continued to speak with a smile. You two have pretty eyeballs, why don't you give me one? I don't think you are very good at seeing people. It's useless to have two, isn't it? As soon as the words came out, Jara and Augustus, who were still beaming at first, suddenly turned pale. Even his body couldn't help shivering. Raising their heads stiffly, Jara and Augustus both wanted to intercede. But before they could make a sound, Jang J spoke first. Don't be too loud, I don't like noise. If you let me cover your mouth for you, it will be bad if you can't open your mouth even if you are here. The two looked at Jang J, already in tears. Although they didn't speak, their eyes were full of pleading. Jang J didn't care about it at all. He stood up slowly, and Jang J said lightly. Don't make me wait too long, I'm going to lose my patience. After finishing speaking, Jang J grabbed Tabor's hair. After dragging him, he arrived in front of Luchini, who was kneeling on the ground. Navigator, it doesn't matter if you have legs or not, right? Clang. The sound of a sharp blade unsheathing echoed in the room. The long knife hanging from Jang J's waist was unsheathed again. Clang. He heard the crisp sound of the blade unsheathing. Luchini trembled physically and mentally, and said quickly. Yes, Captain, I can do many things. I can do a lot. If I have legs, I can do a lot of things. I can cook and do chores. I didn't know about Tabor's conspiracy this time. He said that I would be very interested, so I came here out of curiosity. Please forgive me. At this moment, Luchini's body was still trembling like chaff. Her voice was also trembling with fear. Perhaps the only ones who can understand how scared she is now are Grow and Augustus. What is more terrifying than death is seeing death approaching with your own eyes. As for myself, there is nothing I can do. Jang J narrowed his eyes slightly, squatted down again, and raised Luchini's chin. You are a smart man. You are the only navigator on board. I need you. At least for now. I forgive you this time and the last time. Although there are quite a few navigators, they are not many. It is still a little troublesome to find them again. So, don't bother me. After finishing speaking, Jang J lightly patted Luchini's face twice. Then he stood up slowly, and dragged Tabor's body out of the room. And left a long bloodline on the ground. Russell. The other side. In a small room in another cabin in the ship. After experiencing the fatigue of the day, the girl slightly older than Magna was so tired that she lay on the bed directly. Sister Fina, do you need to work hard? We will be put off the ship when we arrive at the next port. While soothing the muscles for Fina, Magna spoke with some distress. Of course it is necessary. Fina replied without hesitation. Immediately afterwards, she turned over and looked at Magna seriously. Let me ask you, do you think it's better to live here or in that dirty alley? Mona thought for a while. It's here, Fina nodded. You think so too, don't you? Think about it, when we lived in the town, we couldn't get enough to eat every day, and we had to be beaten, smashed and robbed by older vagrants. But here, we don't have to worry about not having enough to eat, and we don't have to worry about someone bullying us, right? Magna thought for a while, but still couldn't understand. But what does this have to do with your work? Even if you are tired, they will still throw us off the ship when they arrive at the port. And they didn't say they want us to work for food. With a smile on Fina's face, she rubbed Magna's little head and said, Little Magna, you have to be smarter, there is a big gap between a full meal and a full meal. No one would want to keep a guy who is worthless and only eats dry food. The reason why I work is to fight for a chance to stay on the ship. Otherwise, when the ship docks, we will have to live hungry every day again. After Fina finished explaining, Magna nodded with a face of sudden understanding. By the way, how about I ask you to deliver the wash water to the captain and boss this morning? Fina asked, remembering her order from the morning. A bright smile appeared on Mona's face. Successful completion. Fina, what's the captain's expression? Magna, with a cold face, he even asked me who asked me to bring him water. Fina froze for a moment, then asked, is he angry? That's not true, I feel, he just seemed to be a little surprised. Magna thought for a while and then said, by the way, I ran into that big sister in the morning after delivering the wash water to the captain and boss, I asked the same question as you. Then what did you say? Fina asked. Mona grinned. I said the captain seems to be angry. Fina, good job. Continue to deliver water to the captain and boss tomorrow, and you will play by ear when the time comes. The two sisters were talking quietly, although there will be bursts of noise from time to time. But the two of them didn't care at all. The sound of the waves beating against the hull at night was completely ignored. Is Magna afraid of the captain? Fina asked after she was free. Although Magna wanted to answer, she was not afraid. But when he thought that lying was not good, he couldn't help but lowered his head and replied in a low voice. Fina grinned. Don't be afraid, Magna, you just need to be careful and bold to do what you should do. I think the captain is very good. Why, he was going to throw us into the sea to feed the fish. Magna recalled the situation when she first boarded the boat, and she was a little scared. But Fina was smiling, and said indifferently, I was also frightened and stupid at the time, but actually thinking about it carefully, it was the captain who frightened the children. Look, the captain not only kept us in the end, but also gave us food, and said that we don't need children to work. So, although the captain seems to have a cold face, he is actually a very kind person, and he treats people very well. There was a starlight in Mona's eyes. Really, Fina? Of course, otherwise, why would we still be here, and how would we be able to fill our stomachs? However, what neither Fina nor Mona knew was the good guy in her mouth. At the moment, he is on the deck, using the hot, fresh bait, making bait. And the fresh bait can only make painful whimpers. Woo woo woo. It was not far from the deck, in the room where Luchini, Jara, and Augustus were. listening to the faint sobbing sound. Their faces were extremely pale, and their bodies trembled violently like sifting chaff. Jara and Augustus also gritted their teeth stiffly and gouged out each other's eyes. The next day, when the bloody night passed, everything seemed to be back to normal. The only difference is that Tabor completely disappeared into this world. And Ferguson would rather die than live. Fina got up early in the morning and got ready for work. As soon as she arrived on the deck, Fina saw 3 familiar faces. Immediately afterwards, Fina asked with a little excitement, "Seniors, today." Before she could finish her sentence, Fina suddenly froze. It was only because Luchini, Jara, and Augustus on the deck heard Fina's shout. They were all frightened and turned their heads violently. Seeing the faces of the seniors, Fina's excited words came to an abrupt end. At this time, the faces of the 3 of Luchini were as pale as snow. Jara and Augustus had bandages wrapped around their eyes, and there were some bright red bloodlines on the bandages. Fina's brain shut down for a while, and then she asked with a puzzled expression. Senior, what's the matter with you? Why are you looking so ugly? Did you not rest last night?" When the 3 of Luchini heard this, they raised their hands synchronously, and subconsciously touched their cheeks. Immediately afterwards, I heard Luchini's trembling voice coping. Yes, we didn't have a good rest last night." Fina blinked her eyes, obviously not convinced. Looking at Jara and Augustus again, Fina asked again. "Senior, what happened to your eyes?" As soon as they heard the word, eyes, Jara and Augustus shuddered. "No. It's okay, I accidentally knocked it last night." Okay, don't talk about this, let's work quickly, there is a lot of work left, we have to hurry up and finish it today." It was also at this moment that Fina felt a strong sense of disobedience. At the same time, it was also found that 2 people are missing. But she didn't continue to ask these questions. Because her intuition was warning her, don't ask. The other side, like before, Magna came to Jang J's room door with a large basin of washing water. Only this time, she didn't knock on the door to disturb Jang J's rest. Instead, after putting down the basin, he sat by the door and rested. She was waiting for Jang J to get up and open the door. What Magna didn't know was that Jang J had already spotted her from the moment she stepped into the corridor. It was also at the moment when Magna just sat down by the door. The door of Jang J's room opened. Squeak. Hearing the door opened, Magna's face immediately showed joy. The next second, she stood up and greeted with a smile. "Are you awake, Captain Boss?" Mona had just finished speaking. Jang J grabbed the clothes behind her and lifted her up. This sudden situation caused Magna's brain to shut down for a while. "Did I disturb you to take a break, Captain?" Magna looked up from behind, looked at Jang J and blinked suspiciously. And Jang J was silent for a moment, and let out a long breath. "Don't call me Captain Boss, what kind of nickname did you make up?" With that said, Jang J picked up Magna and walked outside. The other side, at the deck of the ship. Goo goo. The cries of seagulls echoed in the air. Below, Augustus heard the sound and came out. Newspaper gull. Seeing Augustus below, the newspaper delivery gull slowly descended and landed in front of Augustus. Looking at the newspaper delivery gull carrying newspapers and wanted notices. After hesitating for a moment, Augustus took out 500 Baileys and threw them over. And the newspaper delivery gull also took the coin. A newspaper and a stack of wanted notices were left behind. However, when Augustus saw the bounty offerer on the first sheet of the stack of wanted warrants, Augustus froze. The one who offered the reward was none other than Jang J, the captain of the battle pirates. Looking down, Augustus stared at the reward amount on the arrest warrant, his body trembling uncontrollably. It's anger, it's fear, it's anxiety, all kinds of mixed emotions. You lied to me. You lied to me. You, Tabor. Augustus picked up the wanted warrant, the veins on his forehead popped up, and he trembled uncontrollably. Inside the house, Luchini, Jara, and Fina walked out quickly after hearing Augustus' gnashing of teeth. The most energetic Fina was the first to ask, "What's wrong? What happened, Senior?" However, facing Fina's inquiry, Augustus didn't even look at her. Instead, he looked straight at Jara. Perhaps because of their sympathy for each other, both Jaro and Augustus trust each other and pay attention to each other. Tab lied to me, and everyone. It's him, it's all because of him, and it's all because of him that brought us to where we are today. Seeing Augustus's exclaiming and crazy appearance, Jaro was also a little anxious, and hurriedly asked, "What the hell happened? Augustus, look at it, you will understand." Augustus took out the Zhongtong arrest warrant and handed it to Jaro. It was also at the moment when the wanted warrant was handed out. Everyone has seen the portrait on the wanted notice. The people above, they really couldn't be more familiar with it. But when they noticed the string of numbers under the wanted notice, everyone lost their composure. The pupils of Luchini and Jaro both contracted sharply at this moment. Unable to restrain himself, Jaro raised his hand tremblingly, and took the Zhongtong warrant. At this moment, he only felt pain in his gouged right eye. And it was excruciatingly painful, even more painful than being dug out abruptly. Tabber. Gro gritted his teeth and growled. 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. Fina tiptoed. 167, counting the digits on the arrest warrant. When she counted to 100,000, she immediately had a bottom in her heart. But at this point, she was so frightened that she subconsciously covered her mouth and lost her voice in disbelief. No way. Is this my mistake? Luchini on the side raised her pale face and glanced at Fina, her voice was trembling. 44,900,000. Groner's hand clutching the wanted warrant twitched. At this moment, boundless anger rose in his heart. The bounty amount of 490 million Baileys. This is no longer as simple as a big pirate. And among the big pirates, they all belong to the middle and upper class powerhouses. But Tabor, did he have a perverted mind about such a big pirate? And he still uttered wild words like that. A pirate with a reward of 1 million is a level, and a pirate with a reward of tens of millions is also a level. If you offer a reward of over 100 million, you have stepped into the threshold of a great pirate, whose strength is far beyond tens of millions. There may be individual exceptions, but in general this is the case. And they are just a few little pirates who offer a reward of 10 to 20 million. To challenge a great pirate who offered a reward of 490 million Baileys. Isn't this equivalent to a few toddlers challenging an adult with a weapon? Snort. Grabbing the wanted warrant, Gro snorted angrily, turned around and left. Fina at the side was taken aback when she saw this sudden scene, and asked subconsciously. "Senior, where are you going?" Fina shouted loudly. Kei Luo didn't respond to this at all, and didn't even look at Fina. On the side, Luchini covered her mouth and nose, her face became more and more ugly. Augustus' face was so gloomy that it was about to drip water. Until this moment, until I saw Jang J's bounty. They deeply understood how stupid the thing they wanted to reverse last night was. It was also at this moment that they deeply felt the fear. So much so that the body trembled uncontrollably like chaff. It didn't die, it's great. The big pirate with a bounty of 490 million Baileys wants to rebel against this kind of guy, it's simply tiresome. At this time, Fina also discovered that something was wrong between Luchini and Augustus. Look at their bodies trembling like chaff. There was a look of fear and fear written all over his face. Fina only felt that her head was getting bigger. She is very curious, what happened to them, she also wants to know. But her intuition told her again. You can't ask about this, and if you know it, there will be no good end. Soon, she shifted her attention from Luchini and the others to Zhang Shui. When I think of the series of zeros, I think of the huge reward. Fina couldn't restrain a little excitement in her heart. Wow, Kaka, the bounty of 490 million Baileys, isn't that a lot of money? I didn't expect the captain boss to be so powerful. Is it a big pirate? Fina clenched her fists, joyful in her heart. It is also at this time. Jang J's voice suddenly came from behind them. What are you doing here? As soon as I heard this familiar voice, Luchini and Augustus shuddered like frightened birds. In the next second, they quickly turned around and faced Jang J. He lowered his head tremblingly. Boat, Captain. Fina also turned around belatedly. When she saw that it was Jang J who came, she immediately greeted him respectfully. Captain Boss. This is a big pirate with a reward of over 100 million. It's just that Fina noticed something was wrong right after she finished greeting her. because Jang J is still holding Magna in his hand. Fina, who didn't understand what happened, became a little anxious after seeing this scene. His face instantly became terrified. Boat. Those somewhat stuttering words have not yet been uttered by Fina. Jang J directly interrupted what she wanted to say. You asked her to bring me the toilet water in the morning. Fina was startled. Anxiety is more evident. But before she could speak, Magna, who was held by Jang J, was the first to respond. No, it was Magna who wanted to deliver the water for the captain and boss. Jang J cast a glance at Mona. I didn't even bother to expose her and argue with her. Turning his eyes back to Fina, Jang J said bluntly. There's no need to ask her to bring me toilet water, it's just a meaningless thing. After finishing speaking, Jang J gently tossed Magna in his hand to Fina. Seeing Magna being thrown over suddenly, Fina was startled, and quickly stepped forward, barely hugging Magna who was thrown over. As for Jang J, he also turned his attention to Luchini and Augustus. He had already noticed the newspaper and wanted notice in August's hand. Fortunately, after what happened last night, Augustus became much more visible. Seeing that Jang J was looking this way, he immediately handed over the newspaper and wanted warrant in his hand. Captain, here is today's newspaper and the arrest warrant. Jang J took the newspaper and received the arrest warrant, turned around and walked back towards the cabin. Wow. Jang J turned over the wanted notice, and soon he saw an acquaintance on the wanted notice. Fighting Pirates Crew, Uchiha Obito, bounty, 97 million Baileys. Hungry Wolf, offering a bounty of 76 million Baileys. Tiandao Pain, offering a reward of 80 million Baileys. Yigu Yutai, offering a reward of 70 million Baileys. Seeing that none of the bounties offered by the crew exceeded 100 million yuan, Jang J couldn't help feeling sorry for a while. Isn't there a reward of over 100 million? It seems that Marine's awareness of them is still too low. It's a pity that Obito's bounty failed to exceed 100 million. Geto statue's performance at that time, I think it should be pretty good. It's too low. Jang J looked up at the sky. After a while, he smiled and shook his head again. Take your time, 80 to 90 million is not high, but it's not too low either. But Cypher and Ueni are really left behind. But it's kind of expected. Jang J was about to enter the cabin. But at this moment, Yigu Yutai just came out from the corridor of the cabin. Captain, you came just in time, a new arrest warrant has come out, are you still awake? Jang J handed the arrest warrant in his hand to Yigu Yutai. And Yuta also explained a sentence while receiving the arrest warrant. Wake up, Mr. Obito has made a deck of cards, and now he is playing cards with Mr. Hungry Wolf. Hearing the word card, Jang J gave a slight hint. The card, where did you get it? It was engraved on a wooden board. Yigu Yutai gestured. Jang J smiled helplessly. I said why didn't I see them on the deck today, I didn't expect that they were playing cards behind my back. Fortunately, I still thought that they had a late rest last night and wanted to sleep in. Jang J and Yigu Yutai chatted and walked into the cabin. I went to the place where the wolf-hungry people played cards. Deck. Luchini and Augustus watched Jang J enter the cabin. Only then did I breathe a sigh of relief. Turning her head to look at Fina who was hugging Mona, Luchini reminded her. I advise you not to do these superfluous things, so as not to burn your body. Do it yourself. Don't you die on board before the ship docks. Hearing Luchini's warning, both Sin and Magna raised their heads and looked at her. Thank you for your reminder. Fina thanked her. Luchini was not looking at her, but at Augustus Road. Aren't you going with him? Augustus shook his head. Forget it. What's the use of venting your anger on him? It's better to do nothing and live as long as you do as many mistakes as possible. After that, Augustus walked into the house. Luchini also glanced at the direction where Gro left, and followed Augustus' pace. After seeing Luchini and Augustus both enter the house, Fina looked at Magna eagerly and asked, in the end what happened? Mona grinned. Mission failed. Fina was out of breath, and directly gave Magna a brain crash. Clatter. Ouch. Magna clutched her forehead in pain. Fina said a little angrily. When is it? You can still laugh. Magna rubbed her forehead and said aggrievedly. I don't know what happened, the captain picked me up as soon as he opened the door, and then drove me out. Did you interrupt him to rest? Fina asked. Magna thought for a while and said seriously, shouldn't there be? I didn't even knock on the door, how could I disturb him? Have you been beaten? Does it hurt? Fina checked. Looking at Magna's body, she asked with concern. Magna smiled and explained. Mona wasn't beaten, of course it didn't hurt. The captain picked me up as soon as he opened the door, it seemed like I was flying, it was quite fun. Fina. After, there was no answer, Fina raised her hand and gave Magna another blow. Clatter. Ah, Sister Fina, why are you hitting me again? Magna held her forehead, tears welling up in her eyes. Fina said angrily, because you should fight. Don't you also say that the captain is a good person, so you don't need to be afraid? Why are you so afraid? Magna complained, venting her dissatisfaction. Fina was also speechless for a moment. But Magna is not a little guy who holds grudges. In a blink of an eye, she put the matter aside and asked about the doubts in her heart. By the way, what did that sister's words mean? Fina glanced sideways at the room where Luchini was, and thought about it. Nothing, just let us be more careful. Fina listened to what Luchini said. But not all. She wouldn't stop doing those, in Lucine's eyes, those superfluous things. Because those excess things, in Luchini's mouth are the only way for her to stay. But relatively, she will be careful and cautious. Listen to the captain's words, and don't be self-righteous in matters beyond the scope of your ability. Don't do what the captain doesn't like, don't do any wrong thing. Everything, be more careful. On the other side, an angry Grow. Holding Jang J's reward order, he came to a dark room angrily. Boom, pushing open the door violently, Grow immediately roared into the room. It's all you. It's all because of you that we have become what we are today. What a bounty of 6 million Baileys, what a bounty of 23 million Baileys, do you know how stupid things you have done? It's because of your stupidity that both Augustus and I have an eye gouged out. Grow vented the anger in his heart. But in this dim room, there was only a hoarse voice echoing. Save me, save me. He looked at the other party as if he didn't hear his own words. For a moment, Jara became more angry. Stepping forward quickly, Jara came to a wooden wall, came to a body, and gnashed his teeth in a low voice. You, Ferguson. Today's Ferguson has already been tortured beyond recognition. Like a specimen, he was fixed on the wooden wall with dozens of black sticks piercing through his body and limbs. The only difference from the specimen is that the specimen is dead, but he is alive. This time, he seemed to hear Jara's low voice. Raising his head with some difficulty, he said with excitement and tears in his tone. 22 inches Grow. Grow, is that you? Are you here to save me? Save you? I wish I could kill you now. Jara glared at Ferguson, and then pressed the arrest warrant for Jong Tong in front of Ferguson. Open your eyes and see clearly, the object of your rebellion is not a brat with a reward of only 6 million Baileys. It's a big pirate with a reward of 490 million Baileys. Listening to Jara's words, looking at the portrait and bounty on the wanted warrant, Ferguson suddenly trembled violently. His pupils contracted sharply uncontrollably, and an unprecedented look of fear appeared on his face. It was as if Jang J was standing in front of him right now, beating his head with his fist. No. Don't fight. Don't fight. It's Tabor. It's Tabor who told me to do this, it's Tabor's fault. Ferguson yelled in horror, tears streaming down his face. The other side, in the room where Hungry Wolf and the others are. 76 million Baileys. Looks like a lot. White Mask. How much is yours? Hungry Wolf looked at his bounty and asked Obito with a smile. 93 million Baileys. Obito waved the wanted notice in his hand calmly. The Hungry Wolf smiled, and was selectively deaf in both ears. I don't know. That's something I can't help. How much do you care about Yuta? Obito. Yijiu Yutai showed his wanted warrant with a bright smile. 70 million Baileys, 6 million less than you, Mr. Hungry Wolf. Ha ha ha. Hungry Wolf laughed. At the same time, he raised his hand and patted Yi Bone Yuta's shoulder to comfort him. 70 million Baileys is not bad. Work hard, I believe it won't take long for your bounty to catch up with me. Obito came over and put his arrest warrant in front of the Hungry Wolf. I'm 93 million Pele. Hungry Wolf's smile froze, and he looked at it with selective blindness in both eyes. What's flying past my eyes? Obito changed direction and held up the arrest warrant in front of Hungry Wolf again. Hungry Wolf turned his head away again. Obito changed positions and tried again. Hungry Wolf turned his head away again. Obito switched positions and raised again. Swish swish swish. Several times in a row, the speed of both sides is getting faster and faster. In the end, the Hungry Wolf, who couldn't hold back, was in a hurry. I've seen it, don't raise it in front of me again. Obito smiled angrily and said, then you pretend you didn't see it. Utai offered less reward than you, and you heard every word. The Hungry Wolf turned his head to look at Jang J, and asked curiously. Captain, how much is your bounty? Jang J laughed and said, I'm afraid to hurt you when I say it, 490 million Pele. Hungry Wolf grinned, turned to look at Yuta, and stared at Jang J. Ha, the captain didn't offer a reward. Jang J. Yi-Ji-Yu Utai scratched his head in embarrassment. Mr. Hungry Wolf, did you hear wrong? The captain said that his bounty is 490 million Baileys. Have you really been hit? I said, I'm afraid I'll hit you if I say it. Jang J had a thoughtful look on his face. Obito looked at Jang J and fell silent. Hungry Wolf also looked at Jang J and blinked, and waved his hands frantically after a while. No, 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 how can anyone say so quickly because they are afraid of hitting others? Did you do it on purpose, Captain? Jang J smiled and said nothing. On the side, while Jang J and others were talking about the nose reward order. Tiandao Pain, Cypher and Yueni are playing that wooden poker at the moment. But at the beginning of the game, it wasn't these three people. But Hungry Wolf, Tiandao Pain and Obito. Hungry Wolf and Obito handed the cards in their hands to Cypher and Yueni respectively after Jang J got the arrest warrant. So that the two were forced into the game. Three cold-faced men sat at a table holding cards in their hands. Tiandao Pain holds a big ticket to win. The cards in Cypher's hands are not small, and he is expected to win the game. Yuan had the worst cards in his hand, and took over Obito's mess. Obito and others laughed and talked about the wanted warrant. They looked at the game in front of them and thought about countermeasures. Who will shoot first? Cypher asked coldly. Tiandao Pain also raised his head to look at Yueni and greeted him. Fate won. Yuan Yi silently nodded. Then he drew out the card on the far right, which was also the biggest card in his hand. Looking at the number played by Yueni, Tiandao Pain couldn't help narrowing his eyes slightly. It seems that your hand is not small, Yueni. Yueni thought for a while, and answered. Maybe, I haven't played this, so I don't understand. Tiandao Pain didn't say much, and also drew out a wooden card and put it on the table. Clatter. Is a 2. Cypher glanced at the wooden card, then took out one and put it on it. Clatter. Is a 1. This sudden change made Tiandao Pain stunned for a moment. Lifting his head in doubt, Tiandao Pain looked at Cypher and said. Did you make a mistake? How can 1 beat 2? Cypher looked as usual, and retorted calmly and puzzled. 1 is in the first place, and its status is higher than that of 2. Naturally, its strength is stronger than 2. How can it be defeated? Tiandao Pain was stunned when he heard the words. Before he could react, Yuan Yi nodded thoughtfully. Is that so? As he spoke, he raised his hand and wiped the wooden sign in his hand. Shoo, the symbols on the cards have been re-engraved. Yueni also pulled it out and put it on the table. Z Building, 0. Tiandao Pain turned his head to look at the sound. Looking at the card in Yuan Yi's hand, he looked at the serial number on the wooden card. Tiandao Pain couldn't help lowering his head. Look at your cards. Look at that king. Tiandao Pain looked up at the 0 on Yueni and fell into deep thought. Seeing that Yueni played a 0 card in his hand, Cypher knew it right away. Yuani's card skills are not weak. There is nothing to hesitate. Cypher also raised his hand to recarve the wooden sign. But what he will engrave this time is not a number card. It's a leader card. Because Cypher wants to re-engrave the wooden sign with the word team leader. Swish. The sword energy crossed the wooden sign, and there was the sound of rinsing. Suddenly, there was a crisp sound of Dala from the wooden sign in Cypher's hand. Several wooden cards shattered. Obito, Hungry Wolf and others at the side subconsciously turned their heads and looked over when they heard the crisp sound. When Obito saw that the wooden sign he had worked so hard to carve was broken all over the floor, Obito immediately pressed his head with an unacceptable expression. What happened? Why is my wooden sign broken? It's not long since I finished drawing. At this moment, Dai Wang only felt that his head was in a big tank. Tiandao Pain looked up at Obito upon hearing the sound. After thinking for a while, he explained seriously. They're trying something novel, a new way to play. Obito was furious when he heard this. Immediately afterwards, he quickly came to Cypher in 3 steps and 2 steps, looked at Cypher's collar and said angrily. I just drew this card today, what did you do to it? Pay me the wooden token. However, even Obito grabbed him by the collar. Cypher's expression was still as calm as usual. His gaze was still looking at Yueni, and he spoke seriously. It's a pity, the wooden sign is broken, otherwise the winner should be mine. Hearing this, Obito's mouth almost twisted in anger. In the next second, he frantically shook Cypher, and shouted angrily. Sing you a ghost. Listen to me, you fool. In a certain sea area, on an unknown island town, a slender man with flowing blonde hair led a group of people in black cloaks through the busy streets. The man has the iconic 6 paths vertical stripes on his forehead, armor on his left arm, and a black cross tattooed on his Adam's apple. A group of people buried their heads and walked for a long way. A young man who had been following the blonde man held back for a while before asking curiously. Captain Hawkins, where are we going? The blonde man named Hawkins stopped slowly after hearing the inquiry from the crew behind him. The entire advancing team also stopped. Hawkins, full name Basil Hawkins. Nicknamed the Magician, the captain of the Hawkins Pirates, with a bounty of 249 million Baileys. One of the supernovas of the evil generation. Raising his head slightly, Hawkins looked at the sky above the town, at the blue sky. What the hell is this uneasy feeling? The members of the Hawkins Pirates behind him were taken aback when they heard what Hawkins said. No. Uneasy. The captain also has moments of uneasiness. Did I hear wrong? But that's what the captain said, right? The crew talked a lot, and Hawkins looked back at them sideways and said. Well, that's what I said, you guys go back first. Don't follow me anymore. After that, Hawkins stepped forward again and walked out. The following crew members were a little anxious when they saw it. Captain Hawkins, where are you going? Hawkins didn't even turn his head this time, but responded lightly. Have no idea, I always feel that something is missing, which makes me very uneasy, maybe this is the goddess pointing out the way for the confused Russia. While walking, Hawkins took out a deck of tarot cards from his pocket. Shua la la, the cards flew swiftly in Hawkins' hands. The original arrangement was also disrupted because of this. With the end of the shuffling, Hawkins randomly drew a card from among the many tarot cards. Buzz. The tarot cards let out a whistling sound, and the surface of the cards emitted a purple light. Then let's see what I'm upset about now. With the ups and downs in his heart, Hawkins slowly opened the tarot card exuding purple light. Wow. With a soft sound, the tarot cards were flipped to reveal their faces. And the pattern on the card came into Hawkins' eyes. It was a skull carrying a 7-foot-long scythe on his shoulders and wearing a black cloak. Upright, Shinigami, card. Seeing that what he drew turned out to be a card. Even Hawkins, who is used to divination and has seen this card countless times. At this moment, the uncontrollable pupils shrank sharply, revealing that frightened and terrified expression. Open corner bracket Shinigami close corner bracket. How come? Holding the tarot cards in his hand, Hawkins was stunned for a long time. His eyes trembled slightly, his eyes full of disbelief. I will die. After a while, he choked out such a sentence from his mouth. Slowly raised the heavy head. Hawkins looked at the window on the side of the street, and at himself reflected in the window. I also saw the face that reflected me, with a death appearance. So it is. Is this the cause of my uneasiness? I am about to encounter a catastrophe. No longer looking at the reflected self, Hawkins looked away, and walked forward again. The order of the tarot cards in his hand was also disrupted by him once. Clattering backquote. The crisp sound of shuffling cards echoed in my ears. Hawkins once again drew out a tarot card for divination. What is the probability that I will avoid this catastrophe? 0%. Will it happen sooner or later? The inescapable catastrophe really makes people feel desperate. Hawkins said so. The movements in his hands didn't stop, and the divination continued. What is my chance of surviving the catastrophe? 1%. Seeing such a result and seeing such a low probability, Hawkins shook his hand holding the tarot cards. Although it is said that the appearance of death appears on the face, it has made him a little bit prepared for the result of this divination. But such a low probability still made Hawkins tremble a little. Even in the face of the siege of hundreds or thousands of Marines, Hawkins still has a 70% or more chance of survival when divining. From sailing to now, the result of divination survival probability has never been lower than 60%. But now the result of divination says, you only have a 1% chance of surviving. Isn't this a situation equivalent to death? Whoever divination the survival rate can't be lower than 1%, right? After all, what this 1% symbolizes is a miracle. And this is something that everyone may have. A miracle. It's really sad to put your life on a miracle. Hawkins muttered to himself. Don't ignore me. I didn't ignore you. I was listening very carefully. I didn't mean to break the wooden sign. Can't understand why you're so upset. Hard work. That's my hard work. Do you understand my hard work? On the deck of the ship fighting the pirates, Obito and Cypher were constantly arguing. Located on the ship rail not far from them, Jang J, Uchiha and Hungry Wolf were sitting on the rail of the boat fishing. Still yelling, when did that guy in the white mask become so stingy? Hungry Wolf looked like he didn't feel pain in his back when he was standing and talking. Obito on the side heard the words, and said something for Obito with a smile. After all, Mr. Obito's hard work. But it's really surprising that Mr. Yinfa and Mr. Ueni have never played cards before. With a smile on his face, Jang J said leisurely. It's just that he hasn't waited for him to speak out. Behind him, Obito and others' conversation suddenly came. There is no shortage of planks here. I'll help you tear down one wall, you can make a new one. Makes sense. Hear this. Jang J didn't feel good at this moment, and he was shocked even more. In the next second, he turned his head angrily and cursed at Obito and others. Don't tear down my boat. A trio preparing to break a ship. After being suddenly reprimanded by Jang J, they also froze for a moment and looked at each other. Only Obito's hand holding the wooden wall did not let go for a long time. Not long after, it was still Jang J who made some mediation, and the stuck card matter was considered a bridge. To compensate, Cypher casually caught a big fish. Ueni removes the fish meat and cuts off the fish bones as a new material for Obito to make cards. What's wrong? Sensing Uchiha's gaze on him, Jang J asked suspiciously. Uchiha shook his head. No, it's nothing. It's just that the captain suggested using fish bones to make cards, which surprised me. Jang J, who was idle, did not bother to explain. After all, it's floating on this boundless sea, so it's somewhat lonely. So, some entertainment is also necessary, such as our current fishing, or fish dominoes. At this time, Hungry Wolf also added a sentence. It's faster to grab it directly. Jang J smiled. Catching fish is not as interesting as fishing. Squeak. It was at this time that the door suddenly opened. Located behind Jang J and others, the wooden door of the cabin was slowly pushed open. Afterwards, only Fina and Magna came out slowly. It's those two little guys. Uchiha turned his head and took a look. The Hungry Wolf on the side put down his fishing rod and turned around. After looking at Fina and Magna who appeared on the deck, he also spoke with great interest. It seems that they came here specially to find you, Captain. The moment the Hungry Wolf finished speaking, the eyes of all members of the battle pirates were on Fina and Mona. The invisible coercion and aura from the pirates group enveloped the two of them in an instant. An inexplicable fear also sprouted from the hearts of Fina and Magna. It made the hearts of the two little girls beat a drum. And Jang J. At this moment, he turned around slowly and looked at Fina and Magna. Looking at Jang J sitting on the railing of the boat, I felt the eyes of people around them staring at them. For a moment, Fina was so frightened that she couldn't move. But soon, she gritted her teeth, pulled Magna and walked out. At this moment, their goal is extremely clear, and that is to aim at Jang J. Arriving at a place not far from Jang J, Fina and Magna didn't hesitate at all, and directly knelt down towards Jang J, speaking very sincerely. Boss Captain, we want to join you, we want to be pirates. Let us be one of you. Without any tact, Fina directly confessed her purpose to Jang J. However, Jang J still had that indifferent expression on his face. As I said, nothing matters aboard my ship. Fina hastily opened her mouth to defend. I will not become a burden. Although I look young, I am not small and I can do a lot of things. I can do rough and heavy work, and I don't need to eat a lot. Before Fina could finish my sentence, Jang J's cold voice came out again. Aboard my ship and promise to release you at the next port call. I have been kind enough to you. Listen to Jang J's cold words. Fina's eyes trembled slightly, and her head drooped unconsciously. But she didn't give up just yet. Rather than going back to hell afterwards, it's better to give it a go now. Please, give us a chance. I am willing to do anything. I know that fighting is inevitable for pirates, but I am also good at fighting. I will kill people. Jang J's eyes could not help but narrow slightly. Okay, I'll give you a chance. This sudden reversal made Fina stunned for a moment. Immediately afterwards, Fina raised her head excitedly, looked at Jang J in surprise and said, Boss, Captain, I heard it right. Jang J nodded with his usual expression. I keep my word, as long as you knock him down, I'll let you join us. While speaking, Jang J raised his finger and pointed to the crew on the side. Heard it. With Jang J's promise, Fina jumped up excitedly. Yes, thank you, Captain. As she spoke, Fina couldn't help but tears welled up in her eyes, and she hugged Magna tightly. But at this time, Jang J spoke again. Don't be too happy too early, it won't be too late to be happy after you knock him down. Time, just before the ship docks next time. During this period Wang Haojiao, as long as you defeat him, you can become one of us. Hearing this, Fina didn't hesitate, and readily agreed. No problem. Seeing Fina's confident appearance, Jang J couldn't help but chuckled. You seem to be very confident in your own strength. For the first time, Fina showed a bright innocent smile and said, Boss Captain, you are so powerful, the strength of the crew must not be weak. I may not be able to knock him down now, but as long as there is time and opportunities, I still have hope. Maybe there will be a miracle happen, let me knock him down by chance. Jang J looked at Fina and poured cold water on her proud fighting spirit. With me, miracles don't happen, and they don't work. Let's get to know each other. However, Jang J's words did not weaken Fina's will in the slightest. Still as excited and joyful as before, Fina quickly nodded in response to Jang J's words. No problem, Captain Boss. After finishing speaking, Fina ran to Jang J, the person she had appointed to fight. He came before the man who was dressed in white, with a silver-white long sword hanging from his waist, and with emerald green eyes. Fina stretched out her hand to him, and introduced herself with a smile on her face. My name is Fina, please give me your advice. Hearing this, the man's expression was as cold as usual. After looking at Fina's outstretched hand for a moment, the man also slowly extended his hand and shook hands with her. And told Fina, blowing his name, Uchiha Cipher. Not long after, everyone vacated a space for Fina and Cipher. There is a distance of 5 meters between the two. Fina didn't dare to be careless, and now she has started bouncing around to exercise her muscles and warm her body. And Cipher just stood there, quietly watching Fina who was warming up. Fina, come on. Magna clenched her pink fist and cheered for Fina. After hearing Magna's cheering, Fina gave Magna a big smile. It was also at this time that Magna discovered something was wrong with the surrounding atmosphere. Turning his head subconsciously, he saw that Hungry Wolf and the others beside him looked calm, as if they had no interest in this battle. Aren't you cheering for that big brother? Magna asked curiously. Hungry Wolf and Yigu Yutai looked sideways when they heard the sound. He doesn't need anyone's support. Hungry Wolf closed his eyes and responded. Yigu Yutai also thought for a moment, then looked at Magna and said, Let your sister give up. There is no way she can take Cipher down, the challenge is nothing but flesh and blood. Hearing that Yi Ji Yutai was so unfavorable to her sister, Magna felt a little angry. Then what if it is knocked down? As soon as these words came out, the hungry wolf beside him laughed. If your elder sister can win against that guy and defeat him, then you might as well ask your elder sister to ask the captain for a deputy captain. Mona was slightly surprised. Is he the mate? Yi Ji Yutai shook his head slightly. No, he's not the vice captain, but in terms of the current pirate group 927, he's better than the vice captain. Mona was a little confused. On the court, Fina raised questions to Cypher. Senior, don't you warm up first? Cypher looked at Fina quietly, with a cold tone. Unnecessary. Fina grinned. Then I'm about to go. Cypher was unimpressed. Seeing this, Fina didn't wait any longer. She clenched her fists and rushed towards Cypher as soon as she gritted her teeth. Then I'll be offended. Drink. However, in the next second, there was only a muffled sound. Boom. Fina flew upside down in response, and slammed heavily into the wooden wall on one side. Boom. Boom. The wooden wall collapsed, and countless sawdust flew across. Billows of smoke rose up. Fina just fell silent and passed out on the spot. Magna, who witnessed this scene with light eyes, was stunned on the spot. She looked at the direction where Fina fell to the ground, her pupils shrank sharply, and her mind went blank. Sister, sister, sister. Mona's voice trembled and shouted, but did not get any response. At this time, Yeongshi Batty spoke slowly. Yutai, go and help her treat it. It should be a few broken ribs. Okay. Without procrastination, Yi Ji Yutai responded and passed Magna directly. Walked towards Fina. Raising his hand, Yigu Yutai performed the reversal technique, and began to treat Fina. At this time, Yuan Yi also slowly walked over. Looking at where Fina fell to the ground, Yuan Yi calmly asked. If you didn't stop in time just now, even a simple wave of your hand should be able to kill her. Cypher said truthfully without any modesty. She's more vulnerable than I thought. In the fight just now, Cypher didn't use his own strength, and he was still restraining part of his body strength again. But even so, Fina almost died in his hands. The strength of the two is not at the same level at all. If you compare Fina's strength to a rabbit, then your Cypher is a mountain. Just like what Hungry Wolf said earlier. If Fina can really defeat Cypher, let alone let her join, just let her be the deputy captain. Shortly after realizing it, Magna lay on Fina's body and wept loudly. This also successfully woke up the unconscious Fina. Because of Yi Ji Yutai's treatment, Fina is like a normal person. Just a bit fragmented, but these are obviously not what Jang J and others care about. When the meal time came, Jang J and others went to the restaurant on the second floor to have lunch. Just when Jang J and others were dining, within the same sea area, a pirate ship flying the Skull flag also noticed Jang J's expedition pirate group. This is a group of 100 people, and the scale is not small. The flag pattern on the mast sail is a skull wearing a blue captain's cap and holding 2 knives. Ha 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 ha, come to live. Come to live, little ones. Located on the deck of the boat, a rough man with a beard, wearing a blue captain's suit, holding a binoculars, laughed loudly. As soon as the rough man shouted, a large number of people rushed out of the boat. Come to live. Is there a merchant ship passing by? Shouting, there is a chance to meet some good stuff in the merchant ship. Ha, merchant ships are only good at this point, there are women. Some are even more delicate and tender, in a word, moist. Tisk, it's moist, it's a pity that my temper is also strong. I can't bear this kind of thing. Yes, it's a pity that those women just died like this. Listening to the discussions of CCBI subordinates, the rough guy also stopped observing and put down the binoculars. He turned his head, looked at his group of men and laughed and cursed. Shallowness, you shallow fellows, what's so good about women? Treasures are the most wonderful thing. As long as you have treasure, what can't you get? When some crew members heard this, they couldn't help laughing and teasing the rough guy. Hey, you were the first to start enjoying it, now it's time to talk about us. Yes, Captain, you were not what you said you were. Ha ha ha, there was a lot of laughter. The rough man smacked his mouth and waved his hand to retort. That's different, you have to enjoy it when you should enjoy it, and the treasure is still the first. Also at this time, a burly man with short blonde hair and a muscular body also came down from the second floor. Captain Neil, are you happy to see something? Neil heard the sound and looked over. Seeing that it was a blonde man, he immediately laughed. Gallop, you came just in time. I found a pirate ship. Judging by the size of the ship, I guess it's not too small. There may be dozens of people. Hey, you know, in terms of the amount of treasure, there are more treasures on pirate ships than on merchant ships. This time, Gallop also became interested. Pirate ship, do you know which pirate it is? Neil said with a hasty smile. Don't worry, it's a flag I haven't seen before, so it's not a big problem. Gallop also showed a joking smile when he heard the words. That's good. I hope that the treasures on their ship will not be too small. Don't look at Gallop's big size and looks like a reckless man. But in fact he is not what he looks like. He is the second in command of the Neil Pirates, a navigator, and a think tank. Remember to recognize the pirates, remember to recognize the flag, this matter was also proposed by him. The idea is simple, but it works. And successfully allowed the Neil Pirates to avoid several hard stubbles, some famous and powerful pirates. They specifically picked some little-known pirates with average strength to start. There were not 20 pirates, but 13 or 14 pirates that fell into their hands. This allowed them to seize a lot of treasure. Neil came alive. I saw him puffing out his chest and shouting loudly at his crew. The treasure lies ahead of us. Little ones, tell me, can we let our treasure slip away from our noses, and let others take it? As soon as Neil said this, the crew members on the deck all had mocking smiles on their faces. Of course not. Treasure, that is ours, how can we let others take it? That's right, there's no reason for a duck to run away, let alone treasure. If there are women, there must be treasures. This is the purpose of our pirates. Seeing the high morale of the crew, Neil also felt a little excited. Clang, accompanied by this crisp blade unsheathing sound echoed. Neil pulled out the long knife hanging from his waist, and shouted at the crew. In that case, what are you waiting for? Draw out your weapons, and I will lead you to take back our treasure. Clang, clang, clang. Following Neil's order, the crew members drew out their long knives one after another, raised their weapons high, and shouted in unison. Treasure, treasure, treasure. Neil turned around with a smirk, pointing the tip of the knife at the warring pirate group where Jang J and the others were. Target, the pirate ship ahead, full speed. Hunting time is here. It was also when the Neil pirates were heading towards Jang J's conquest pirates at full speed. Battle pirates, in the restaurant on the second floor of the ship. The hungry wolf bit the spoon, tilted his head back, and looked at the direction where the Neil pirates were. These guys, don't they want to trouble us? Even though he didn't actually see the Neil pirates. Even if there is a wooden wall in front of him blocking. But this did not prevent him from locking on to the movements of the Neil pirates. The same goes for the other members of the battle pirates who were having lunch. Without exception, they all locked on the movements of the Neil pirates. It's really not the right time to come here, but it's just when we're having dinner. Obito felt a little helpless. Jang J also looked up at the direction of the Neil pirates. After a while, he said something lightly. No hurry, at their speed, it will take about 20 minutes to approach the ship. These times are enough for us to deal with them after eating. On one side, Luchini and the others listened to the conversation of Jang J and the others. That sounded like a fog. Is someone coming towards us? Luchini asked suspiciously. Augustus and Jara on one side also shook their heads at the same time. Have no idea. I looked out the window, and there were no shadows of other ships. Since they all said that, it shouldn't be wrong. Could it be marine? Luchini suggested the possibility. But this time, Augustus and Jara did not answer the call. It hasn't been long. Jang J stopped eating suddenly. Immediately afterwards, I saw him laughing a little self-deprecatingly. I forgot about the naval gun. As soon as Jang J finished speaking, there were piercing whistling sounds outside. Shish, shish, shish. Several dark cannonballs streaked across the sky, hitting the ships of the pirates. Bang, 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 boom. A huge explosion roared through the air. But it's a pity that the accuracy of these shells is a little bit worse. None of them landed on the boat, and all fell on the sea. But even so, the power of the shell explosion still stirred up huge waves on the sea. All the ships fighting against the pirates were violently turbulent. Boom boom, squeaky. The violent shaking of the ship made the ship itself make harsh noises as if it was overwhelmed. Unprepared, Luchini, Augustus, and Jara staggered and almost fell. Located in the cabin of Fina and Magna. It was because of the sudden turmoil that he fell to pieces and gasped in pain. Hiss, it hurts. Only Jang J and others were not affected by the turbulence of the ship, and they still sat in their original positions. The deafening roar seemed to be still echoing in my ears. Luchini said with a terrified expression. Is this shelling? Augustus and Jara on one side also had ugly faces. Where is this coming from? Is it marine? The words of the three did not receive a response. But at this moment, Jang J put down the tableware in his hand, stood up slowly, and greeted him calmly. You continue to eat, I will deal with it. After finishing speaking, Jang J walked out of the restaurant. Yuan Yi also stood up at the same moment, and said in a cold tone. I'll go with you. Just stay in the boat. When Yuan Yi followed Jang J, he still didn't forget to say hello to the other crew members. The three Luchinis on one side also ran out anxiously after hesitating for a while. Only Cypher and others continued to eat lunch as if nothing had happened. The other side, on the deck of the ship of the Nile pirates. Seeing a volley of naval guns firing, not a single shell hit the opposite ship. Nailton said in a hurry. You guys, do your eyes grow on women? A round of volleys, but not a single shell hit. After being scolded by the captain, all the gunners were not angry. Instead, he responded with a grin. Is this a normal thing, Captain? Yes, the sea is so stormy now, it's normal to miss the first shot, just wait for me to calibrate it. Jahaha, just take a look, Captain, the next shot, I will sink their boat. Listening to the confident words of the crew, Neil also had a playful face. Then I'll wait to see your battle. Neil had finished speaking. Gallop, who was standing aside, suddenly grabbed Neil's shoulders and asked with a frown. Neil, are you sure there is no problem with the pirate ship in front? Why do I feel that the flags on their mast sails look familiar? Neil took away Gallop's hand holding his shoulder, and comforted him with a smile on his face. Don't be suspicious, it's really no problem, I remember all those powerful pirates. And look, there isn't even a single pirate on duty on their watchtower. This looks like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered, so you can rest assured. As he spoke, Neil patted Gallop's shoulder lightly to express his comfort. But Gallop still frowned, feeling a faint sense of uneasiness in his heart. I always feel like I'm forgetting something important. That feeling makes me a little uneasy. This has been comforted twice, Gallop is still like this, and Neil doesn't want to care about him anymore. Oh, what time is this? Still this anxiety, that anxiety. Didn't you just forget something? When this battle is over, you will be able to remember. After finishing speaking, Neil ignored Gallop, turned his head to look at the gunner's position and shouted. Running ready. Click, click. The gunners loaded the shells in a hurry. Seeing this, Neil also raised his hand high, and suddenly lowered it while yelling. Fire! Shua! Bang! 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 The sound of continuous shelling resounded, and the flames burst from the muzzle. A series of dark cannonballs immediately shot towards the ship of the pirates not far away. Shish, 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 sharp shells whizzed from far to near. And in the battle against the pirates. At this moment, 5 people also came out of the restaurant on the second floor. As soon as I went out, I saw shells flying all over the sky. Luchini, Augustus, and Gro were all suffocated on the spot by fright, and their pupils constricted sharply. It's over. So many shells, can't be stopped. The ship is going to be sunk. The faces of the 3 of them were extremely ugly, and their expressions of worry and fear were all on display. Can be ahead of them. In the face of this sudden bombardment, Yuan Yi, who followed Jang J, only had a simple sentence. I come. Clang. The dark red long knife was out of its sheath. Holding the Hidao in one hand, Yuan Yi took a sudden step. Round dance. Following Yuan Yi's soft words, Hidao swung out suddenly. In the next second, the red flame of the Japanese stock suddenly surged out from Yuan Yi's knives. Swish. The scorching breath filled the air. At this moment, the surface of the sea was reddened by Yuan Yi's slash. The shells in midair were covered and swallowed by the crimson flames in an instant. Boom, boom, a huge roar resounded in midair. The dazzling fire that was produced was like the second scorching sun under the sky. Rear, Luchini, Augustus, and Jara, after seeing Yuan, the knife touched the red flames and solved the artillery fire in an instant. All of them stared wide-eyed, their faces full of astonishment and disbelief. Read it right, his knife caught fire. It's unbelievable that so many cannonballs were dealt with so easily by him. Is in his hand really a knife? Scorching, as hot as a fire. Is he a capable person? The one who ate the legendary devil fruit and obtained the Demon King. The trio spoke vibrato. His eyes trembled violently like an earthquake. It was also at this moment that they seemed to really get to know this indifferent guy. What kind of person is that? That scorching breath, that terrifying experience. It's not an exaggeration to call it a monster. It's not just them. Even Jang J couldn't help being stunned when he saw Yuan Yi displaying the circle. This is slightly different from what he remembered. Is this a round dance? Jang J questioned his soul. But soon he was relieved. Yuan Yi is the ancestor of the breath of the sun, and he is the strongest swordsman born with Madara pattern and penetrating world. Coming here and crossing the shackles of the world, its strength will definitely increase. It is not surprising to have some comprehension and growth in swordsmanship. And the other side, seeing himself firing another round of shells. Even in an instant, after being devoured and destroyed by a crimson flame. Kneel, Gallop and others are all stupid. The Nile pirates at this moment. Almost all the members were dumbfounded in place, staring blankly at the direction of the pirates, their eyes widened. Then, what is that? Am I dazzled? The crew members of the Nile pirates looked at each other subconsciously. There was obvious trance and astonishment in his expression. I seem to see that guy cut a knife, and then a ball of flames burst out of thin air, detonating all those shells. I saw it too. Such a big movement, such a dazzling light, it's hard not to see it, right? What the hell is going on? It was also when the crew members were talking with astonishment on their faces. Gallop on one side also stared wide-eyed, with a horrified look on his face. Did that guy's knife cut out flames? Neil on the side also swallowed with some difficulty and said, I think it should be because our eyes are dazzled. How could the knife cut out the fire? As if he had found an excuse to comfort himself, Neil gradually calmed down. And shouted at the crew behind. You all saw it just now, didn't you? What kind of thing like a flame was cut out with a knife? Hearing Neil's shout, all the crew members looked at each other in confusion. Before he could respond, Neil's resonant voice came again. You fools, are women playing too much, and you can only see women clearly with your eyes. Just now I could see clearly that a cannonball exploded in midair before it even landed. All the surrounding cannonballs were detonated by this one cannonball. Which guy is it? Even this kind of shell dares to be stuffed into the barrel, isn't it afraid of blowing yourself up? The crew members were taken aback by what Neil said. But soon, they reacted. The uneasy mood in my heart settled down a bit, and the faces of the crew also showed forced smiles. But soon, these smiles were no longer far-fetched and became natural. What? It turned out to be like this. I just said I was dazzled. How could Che get angry out of thin air? By the way, which softy filled the cannonball? Did your eyes grow on the woman's body? Ha 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 ha. With the sound of ridicule falling, there was a burst of laughter on the deck. Neil and Gallop also laughed unconsciously. It seems to be a false alarm. Gallop muttered to himself. It was also when the crew of the Nile pirates cheered. What everyone didn't notice was, there were two figures, lightly landed on their boat. Two people, one wearing a red robe, holding a dark red long knife. The other was wearing a gray shirt with a long knife at his waist. It was Yuan Yi and Jang J who came here. At this time, Jang J was standing at the bow of the Nile pirates. And Yuan Yi, holding a dark red long knife, landed on the bow deck. Looking at Neil and others who were talking and laughing. A smile appeared on Jang J's face, and Yo-Yo spoke a little in a calm tone. You seem to be very happy. Did something good happen to you? Telling it makes me happy too. As soon as these words came out, the entire deck fell silent instantly. Everyone froze for a moment after hearing Jang J's voice. Neil and Gallop turned around abruptly, looked at Jang J and Uchiha with vigilance and scolded in a low voice. Who are you? You say me. Hearing the other party's rhetorical question, Jang J also pointed to himself amusedly. But immediately afterwards, he pointed to his ship and smiled. He, did you see that ship? I am the captain of that ship. Upon hearing that the other party turned out to be the captain of their target, everyone present was stunned for a moment. In the next second, the pirates on the deck burst into roars of laughter. Ha ha ha. Neil also turned his head jokingly, and looked at the crew behind him. Hey, little ones, did I hear you right? Who did he just say he was? He said he was the captain of that ship. The crew responded loudly with a grin on their faces. And this loud and deafening voice made the smile on Neil's face even more playful. Turning around, Neil looked at Jang J again. Then, Mr. Captain, tell me. You came to my base camp just like this. Do you want to kneel down and beg me for mercy, or do you want to seek death? Facing the irony of the joke in Neil's words, the smile on Jang J's face remained the same, and his tone was even more calm as usual. I'm here to kill you all. Looking at Jang J's calm and composed appearance, Gallop beside Neil immediately sensed something was wrong. It's crazy. No, it should be said that I am too confident. Going straight to the enemy's base camp, facing such an obvious difference in numbers, they can still say such words. These two people are absolutely extraordinary. Strong uneasiness welled up in my heart. Gallop has already noticed the obvious sense of disobedience. Even at this moment, he actually felt that Jang J looked familiar. But Neil, who was standing beside him, didn't notice that something was wrong at all. In Neil's eyes, in other words, in the eyes of all members of the Neil Pirates except Gallop, they have only one feeling about the matter. That is, the other party is rushing to die. The captain of the other party came directly to their base camp. And only took one person. If this isn't death, what else can it be? Ha 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 ha. Little ones, did you hear that? This kid said, he is here to kill us all. Just the two of them, he wants to kill all of us, more than 100 people. Neil laughed and pointed at Jang J, talking to his crew. Gallop, who had already sensed something was wrong, quickly pulled Lanier and said in a deep voice. Wait, Neil, something doesn't seem right. But at this juncture, Neil couldn't be bothered to talk to the suspicious Gallop. He has never heard of this kind of thing where the other party rushes to die and is so arrogant. If you don't even enjoy this kind of fun, it will be too disappointing. Just ignore Gallop's words. Neil looked at his crew members with a smile, and said jokingly. Then, are there any kind-hearted people who come out and tell this brat, oh, no. It's our big captain, isn't this just playing tricks? Following Neil's order, it fell. Immediately, a crew member raised his hand with a smirk on his face, and said to himself because of the sound. I'll tell him. And I. Me too. Add me. And I. After a while, more than a dozen men with weapons walked out with grim smiles on their faces. And Neil also looked at Jang J again, and joked. How is it, Captain, do you beg for mercy? Jang J smiled. Overlooking Neil and the others, the voice said calmly. To them. As soon as the words came out, Uchiha on the deck immediately moved. Even though there were a dozen pirates holding weapons standing in front of him, his expression was as indifferent as usual. Holding a dark red long knife, he walked over. Seeing the other party, there were only two people here. It is still one. The members of the Neil Pirates were immediately happy. Are you trying to fight us one-on-one? Yell, boy, this is not a play. There are not so many rules in the battle between life and death. Good boy, have courage. Let me play a one-on-one match with him. A dozen or so members of the Neil Pirates were arguing, but they didn't take the approaching fate seriously at all. Gallop, who saw this scene, was so angry that the veins on his forehead popped up and yelled loudly. What are you idiots doing? This is a battle. Keep an eye on your opponents. The crew members looked at Gallop and frowned slightly when they heard the sound. The other side, Uchiha didn't have the habit of reminding the opponent before making a move. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and the long knife in Yuan's hand raised slightly by half an inch. In the next moment, there was only a flash of body shape. The whole person disappeared in an instant. Whoosh. Not good. Gallop, who witnessed Yuanyi's disappearance, was shocked. He turned to look at his companions. Gallop then saw a red shadow, which pierced through the dozen or so crew members in the battle in an instant. Clang buzz. Shua. The sharp buzzing of blades and the ear-piercing roar of piercing the air were long overdue. A dozen or so crew members of the Nile pirates bleed on the spot. Puff, puff. The dark red blood sprayed into the air just like the fountain. Crash. More than a dozen pirates who were full of fighting spirit just a second ago. In the next second, his vitality was cut off. They didn't even make the least wail, and fell straight on the deck. Plop, plop, thump. Facing this sudden scene, the entire Nile pirates fell silent, so much so that the whole ship was filled with a strange quiet atmosphere. The crew members behind Nile were even more terrified at the moment. The pupils shrank slightly unconsciously, and their faces all revealed an expression of incredible horror. Hey, hey, hey. Did I read it right? Is this serious? That guy, actually beheaded a dozen people in an instant. Are you kidding me? They were beheaded just like that. I didn't even see what that guy was doing. This moment, the crew members of the Nile pirates had smiles and jokes on their faces. Just the palpable horror and fear. Seeing Yuanyi standing alone with his usual indifferent expression, everyone subconsciously took a step back in fear. Even Nile, who is the captain. After seeing Yuan beheading dozens of people in an instant with his own eyes, his pupils couldn't help trembling violently like an earthquake. At this moment, his eyes were full of unbelievable horror. They just died like this. Is that a lie? This must be a joke with me. You stand up. Now is not the time to joke. Next to Nile, Gallop grabbed Nile's shoulders and said solemnly with an unprecedented expression. This is no joke, Nile. This time, we're in big trouble. These two guys are not simple, and the captain. I seem to have seen it somewhere. Clang. While speaking, Gallop had already pulled out the weapon at his waist. You can't underestimate carelessness anymore. Call the crew to go together. There are only two of them, the advantage is still with us. Gallop's words eased the horror in Nile's heart. After calming down, Nile also said while biting his resentment. Let these two fellows fool you. He looked back at his crew. Nile immediately noticed the fear on their faces. This time, Nile Lee couldn't help but cursed. What are you afraid of? Are we more than 300 people still afraid of the two of them? Come on, chop them up. His sudden reprimand stunned the crew behind him. After a while, they reacted with a face full of enlightenment. That's right, that's right. There are only two of them but we have more than 100 people, what are you afraid of doing alone? That's right, each of us could drown them with a mouthful of spit. Brothers, come up with me and chop him up. With one person taking the lead, the morale of the crew who had been intimidated by Yuanyi was immediately boosted. Immediately afterwards, they yelled and killed Chao Yuanyi. Chop him. Seeing this, Yuan didn't say anything nonsense. Swish, waving a long knife in his hand. Yuan, holding the long knife tightly in his hand, he dodges and kills the pirates who were rushing towards him. Whoosh. This time, Yuan's speed was faster than before. In just an instant, Yuanyi's figure pierced through the air. Just now when I met the members of the Nile pirates, Yuanyi cut out with a knife and took away the three of them in an instant. Shua, Chila, puff, bright red blood splattered everywhere. Even though he was hostile to hundreds of people, there was no trace of fear on Yuanyi's face. It even directly broke into the dense crowd, brandishing the long knife recklessly, as if to be beheaded by those 100 people today, at this very moment. Swish swish swish, Chila, puff, the dark red blade light flickered, bringing up patches of dark red blood. In the Nile pirates, there were also people who fell in a pool of blood. In just a few breaths of fighting, the number of people killed by the Nile pirates has exceeded the number of days. Nile on the side watched his crew members fall in a pool of blood one after another. I can't help but feel my scalp go numb. Afraid of Yuanyi's strength. But now, they can't be afraid to fight, and they can't stop fighting. If the crew is gone, he's next. Nile, who understood this, gritted his teeth and was about to raise his knife to join the battle. But before he acted, he suddenly remembered something, and then hurriedly said to Gallop beside him. Catch the thief first and capture the king first, I'll drag that swordsman down, and you led someone to take down his captain first. I think that kid should be so arrogant and confident because of the existence of this swordsman. As long as we take him down, we can contain that sword king without any effort. Hearing this, Gallop nodded. Agreed with Neil's point. In the next second, he raised his knife and shouted at a group of people behind. You guys come with me. Go get the captain first. As long as he is taken down, everyone will be saved, and we will win this battle. The team of nearly 20 people looked up upon hearing the sound, and then responded in unison. $7. They had already been terrified by Yuan Yi's display of strength. Now that they have the opportunity to get out of this hellish battle situation, they can't wait for it. Get him. Get that kid. Under the leadership of Gallop, a group of people raised their swords to kill Jang J with renewed morale. And Jang J, who saw this scene. He saw Jang J, who had nearly 20 people, who was killing him with an excited expression on his face. At this moment, not only did I not feel a trace of fear. Instead, there is a little joy. A ferocious smile couldn't help showing on his face, and Jang J's tone was full of appreciation. Not bad. It's a very passionate scene, really exciting. When faced with a desperate situation, like the protagonist, he found a breakthrough in the desperate situation, and fought to the death with hope and enthusiasm. This, really good. Clang. While speaking, Jang J's long knife around his waist suddenly came out of its sheath. The crisp sound of the blade unsheathing echoed. Gallop, who was running in the front, suddenly felt his heart tighten, and his pupils shrank sharply. At this moment, intense anxiety enveloped his body and mind. The intuition that he had been fighting for many years was frantically warning his brain at this moment. I can't go any further. I can't go any further. Will die. I will die. Definitely will die. The boundless fear that rose in his heart made Gallop's mind go blank for an instant. In the next second, without even thinking about it, he jumped to the ground without hesitation. It was also the moment Gallop jumped in. Jang J at the bow drew out the long knife at his waist. The smile on his face also converged at this moment. Instead, it was that face full of regret and regret. Unfortunately, you have won the jackpot. After the words fell, Jang J's suppressed breath suddenly appeared. Boom. A strong and substantial terrifying aura surrounds Jang J's body. And Jang J, at the same moment, he casually waved the long knife in his hand. Shua. Buzz. There was an ear-piercing whistling sound. The colored sword light shot out instantly, and slashed at the rushing pirates head-on. Chila. The dark red blade slashed across, and pieces of heads flew up in response. Puff. Even the ship building behind them was chopped off by Jang J. Shoo. Boom. The ship building that was slashed by Jang J's knife hovered in midair for a moment before crashing down. Boom. Boom. A huge roar resounded in all directions. The heavy half of the shipbuilding fell down the hull, causing the whole ship to sink a lot suddenly. Boom. A circle of waves up to several meters high was shaken on the sea surface. On the deck, billowing smoke and dust engulfed innumerable pieces of sawdust and permeated all directions. But in a short while, a thick cloud of smoke and dust surrounded the deck of the entire ship. The deck was originally full of fighting and noise. At this moment, the silence returned again. Standing at the bow of the ship, Jang J glanced lightly at the situation on the deck of the ship. It's good luck that this escaped. While speaking, Jang J raised his hand and waved to disperse some of the smoke and dust coming towards him. But soon, with a gust of sea breeze blowing past, the billowing smoke and dust on the ship was carried out by the wind. Ahem. There was a slight coughing sound, and Gallop, who was lying on the deck to avoid Jang J's blow, slowly raised his head. The first time he raised his head, he saw Jang J, who was standing on the bow of the boat, looking at him with a smile. Also at this moment, Gallop looked at Jang J's smiling face. A picture suddenly flashed in my mind. I remembered. In an instant, Gallop suddenly came to his senses. At this time, he finally understood why he had a sense of disobedience before. I finally understood why I felt a familiar feeling when I saw this guy in front of me for the first time. That's because he has seen this face in other places. On top of the latest newspaper. Yes, is that you? Thinking of Jang J's background. Gallop's pupils suddenly shrank uncontrollably. At this moment, his body began to tremble uncontrollably, and his eyes were full of unbelievable horror. In the face of Gallop's sudden words, Even Jang J couldn't help being slightly taken aback, and said in surprise. You know me. The other side. Neil also got up from the deck in a disheartened manner. However, he didn't fall on the deck to avoid Jay's slash. It was because of the violent turbulence caused by the falling of the shipbuilding on the ship that knocked him down. After wiping the ashes on his face, Neil was full of anger. You guys. It's just that Neil hasn't finished speaking yet. The things he saw with his eyes first caused a huge impact on his brain. Looking at the bloody scene in front of him, Neil froze on the spot, and his brain crashed immediately. Both eyes trembled violently like an earthquake, and Neil's body was shaking like chaff at this moment. How did this happen? All dead. All dead. In front of you, on the deck of a wide ship. At this time, there were corpses all over the ground, and even the floor was stained dark red with blood. The strong bloody smell tangled in the nostrils, and the strong irritating aura rushed straight to the sky. Looking at those headless corpses, looking at those tragic dead corpses lying in disorder, and the heads with wide-eyed eyes. Even Neil, who has experienced countless battles and seen countless dead bodies. At this moment, I also felt a strong discomfort, and the water was tumbling for a while. The figure of Gallop flashed instinctively in his mind, and Neil yelled worriedly. Gallop! Neil, who didn't get a response right away, almost fell into a frenzy. Fortunately, in the next second, he saw Gallop, who slowly stood up from the pile of corpses. With an involuntary look of joy on his face, Neil called out again. Gallop! Gallop turned his head slowly. Looking at Neil's figure, Gallop looked desperate, and even his voice trembled a little. Neil, we have encountered a hard problem this time. This guy is Jang J, the captain of the pirate team that offered a bounty of 490 million Baileys. Looking around, there are only 4 people who are still standing. Dead bodies littered the deck. And these are all the crew members of their Neil Pirates. Who would have thought that the Neil Pirates, which had hundreds of players a few minutes ago, now only have 2 people left? When I heard Gallop reveal the identity of the other party, and heard the astonishing reward amount, Neil froze in place, his pupils shrank uncontrollably. What did you say? That guy's reward, 490 million Baileys. Lifting his head in disbelief, Neil looked at Jang J standing on the bow of the ship and was horrified. A guy who looks so young is already a big pirate with a reward of over 100 million. And it will be nearly 500 million. The bounty offered by myself is only 63 million Baileys, and with Gallop's 38 million Baileys bounty, the two together barely exceed 100 million. As for the other party, a reward of 490 million Baileys was offered for one person. Still so young. What kind of monster is this? Seeing that the other party actually recognized him, Jang J was even more surprised. Immediately afterwards, a smile appeared on his face again. You really know me. A wanted warrant with a reward of 490 million Baileys. I just arrived this morning. It was less than half a day before someone recognized me. Jang J was quite surprised. But, one size fits all. Jang J looked at Gallop and Neil, smiled and said leisurely. Knowing that I'm still attacking me. I haven't troubled you yet, but you are the first to attack us. How brave. Jang J narrowed his eyes slightly. For the sake of your bravery, I will reward you all to feed the fish in the sea together. After all, Jang J beckoned. A red glow immediately flashed across the necks of Gallop and Neil. Shua, puff. Soon after, the ships of the Neil Pirates also became dozens of pieces following the cutting of several dark red blade lights, and disintegrated and scattered on the sea level. Boom, 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 on the ship of the pirate group. Located by the side of the boat, Luchini, Jara, and Augustus witnessed this brutal battle with their own eyes. All of them were so frightened that their faces turned pale, and they trembled as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Is this still a battle? Can't it be considered a battle? This is not a battle, but a one-sided massacre. The difference between the strengths of the two sides is not even a star, and this is not at the same level as Li Huang. The 3 of them spoke one word at a time. The fear of Jang J in his heart has reached an unprecedented level after this war. It was also in this battle of less than 3 minutes. Only then did they deeply realize the strength of this group of people. Could it be that the island where the marine base was stationed was also destroyed by them when they came out of prison that day? Suddenly, a terrible thought rose in Luchini's mind. But in the next second, she shook her head desperately, throwing this thought out of her mind. No, no, how is this possible? The movement at that time, but even the prison below could feel a strong shock. How many people are there? And the island is so big, and the movement at that time did not last for a long time. They couldn't do it at all. The island was destroyed because of the earthquake. After sorting out her thoughts and confirming her thoughts, Luchini's heart became a little more stable. Also at this time, Jang J and Yuan Yi also returned to the boat. Da. There were two clear sounds, and the two figures landed steadily. Putting the long knife back into its sheath in his hand, Jang J glanced at Luchini and the others, then walked to the second floor of the ship. Just as Jang J was about to go upstairs, the doors in the cabin suddenly opened their doors. Boom. Immediately afterwards, Fina and Magna ran out with panicked faces. What happened? Seeing Jang J who was about to go upstairs, Fina's eyes lit up. Okay, Captain Boss. I just heard a loud noise. Is it a shell? Is there an enemy? Jang J looked sideways. After being silent for a while, he responded calmly. After speaking, he walked to the second floor again. But Fina got excited when she heard that there was an enemy, and this was a good opportunity to show off. Where is it? Where is the enemy? They went into the sea to catch fish. Jang J's voice came slowly, and then he entered the restaurant on the second floor. But Fina and Magna, after hearing this answer, they had question marks and no on their faces. Catch fish in the sea. It's all fired, they don't fight, what fish are they going to catch in the sea? Ding. Congratulations to host for gaining plus 300 battle points. Conquest value. 5,200. In the restaurant on the second floor, the system's notification sound echoed in Jang J's mind. This made him feel a little better, and he subconsciously looked at the sea view outside the window and muttered to himself. 300 points, not bad. The distance from 6,400 points is still 1,000 and a few hundred. Soon. Chapter 51. After the incident with the Nile pirates. The Battle of Pirates also ushered in a period of calm and stable days. During this period, they never encountered pirates or marines, not even a ship. These days should have been boring. But in fact, it is not the case. A few days ago, Fina challenged Cypher again. And the result, needless to say, Fina failed miserably. But with the first fight, Cypher has a certain understanding of Fina's fragility. So much so that in this challenge, Cypher did not cause too much damage to Fina. Also from that day on, Jang J could often hear a voice in his ear. Are you thirsty, Captain Boss? It's a bit windy, do you need a windbreaker, Captain? Captain, this is today's newspaper. As soon as the newspaper delivery gull arrives, I will bring it to you immediately. Boss Captain, the sun is so bright, you must be thirsty after fishing for so long. I'll pour you a glass of juice to quench your thirst. If you don't like it, or want to drink something else, tell me, I'll pour it for you right away. Come on, it won't be long. Captain Boss. In the early morning, on the second floor of the pirate ship. Jang J is having breakfast with the crew. A familiar voice came to Jang J's ears again. Boss Captain, today's newspaper has arrived, do you want to read it now? If you don't need it, I'll put it on the table here for you first. The person who spoke was none other than Fina. At this time, she was standing about 2 meters behind Jang J, waiting for Jang J's words. And Jang J, under Fina's successive dedication, turned his head and asked slowly at this moment. Tell me, what do you want? If you want to rely on your hospitality these days to join us, then don't waste your time. In these days, although Fina would often come to Jang J. But this didn't make Jang J feel annoyed. Because what she handed to Jang J at that time happened to be what Jang J needed, or it would feel good to have. It's like when fishing, maybe Jang J doesn't need to drink water, but drinking a glass of water can quench his thirst is inevitable. It's like newspapers, maybe Jang J doesn't need to buy or read them, but it's undoubtedly better if someone can buy newspapers regularly and have them delivered to him. Take the example of yourself having breakfast. When Faye brought the newspaper the day before yesterday, Jang J was also having breakfast, and Fina would ask but would not bother. If Jang J needs it, she will throw it away immediately. If CCBH doesn't need or doesn't respond for a while, Then she will not ask a second time, but will put the newspaper on the table and leave. I heard Jang J asking himself so straightforwardly. Fina was also a little embarrassed and laughed. Hey, that won't be the case. You have given me a chance, Captain. Have I made progress in this regard? Jang J raised his head and asked again. Want to change to challenge your opponent? Fina smiled and shook her head. No, Captain, you can designate an opponent for me to challenge and give me a chance. I am already very grateful. How can you pick and choose? If, Captain Boss, can you just let someone guide me to fight? Fina said such a request. Jang J was slightly taken aback, and the others also cast doubtful glances at Fina at this moment. Seeing this, Fina could only say with some embarrassment. All I know are the fighting moves of some hooligans, and I can't get on the stage. Hearing this, Jang J also smiled. He turned his head to look at his crew members, and said to Fina. You can ask any of them to guide you. As long as they are willing to guide, I will not interfere in any way. As for whether you can let them guide you, it depends on your life. Hearing that Jang J actually agreed, Fina's face immediately revealed an excited look. Really, thank you, Captain. Hey, I'm lucky, otherwise I wouldn't have met you, the captain. After thanking Jang J, Fina flattered her without showing any signs of expression. It's just that Fina won't know. Those present, no matter who guides her, she will never be able to defeat Cypher. No matter how hard Chen works, the probability of her defeating Cypher is only 0. However, if Fina can ask Ueni and the others to guide them a little bit, it might as well be used as a means for her to leave here. With permission from Jang J, Fina quickly took action and asked Ueni and the others for guidance. It's just that what Fina never thought of was, when she mentioned it to Yuan Yi actually said 2 words in such an understatement. Can. Tien Fina was taken aback by this sudden answer. After reacting, he was ecstatic immediately. After that, Fina did not show her courtesy to Jang J less. And she also pulled Mona. In addition to being on call to Jang J, they will also do the orders of other members of the pirates. Several days passed by. On a certain sea area, there were constant shouts of killing, and the sound of clashing iron and steel was continuous. Kill, 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 fight with them. Dang 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 dang. At this moment, a brutal fight is in progress. 2 pirate ships of the same size approached each other, and the crews on both sides fought fiercely. But it was in the midst of fierce fighting. There is a young man who seems a bit out of place with the surrounding environment. The fight below is going on. And he, sitting aside like a normal person, played with the tarot cards in his hand. Looking at the results of the divination in his hands, Mao Nian couldn't help but fell into deep thought. Reversed, world, card, end, begin, only by them. While speaking, the young man couldn't help looking down, the pirate group who was fighting with him. Just looking at it from the surface, it is enough to see that the other party is not his own. However, the result of divination is still the same, indicating that he will be terminated. Could it be, is the result of the divination wrong? After closing the tarot cards, the young man slowly raised his head. Shua. Suddenly there was an ear-piercing whistling sound. Immediately afterwards, there were several exclamations. Captain, Captain Hawkins, careful. The young man named Hawkins, agility tilted his head. Call out. Boom. A knife blade exuding a cold glow whizzed past his ears in an instant. It was firmly nailed to the wooden wall behind him. The huge force made the long knife swing violently even when it was nailed to the wooden wall, echoing for a while, whispering. Hawkins squinted at the blade behind him, then turned his gaze to the battlefield below. Your destiny has already been written by the goddess. Riki's struggle is nothing but wasted effort. While speaking, Hawkins slowly stood up. The battlefield below. The captain of the pirate group, who was the leader, looked at Hawkins standing up with resentment on his face. The knife just now, why didn't it cut your guy's head in half? Obviously, the blade that flew past Hawkins' ear just now was thrown by him. Hawkins looked down at him coldly, his tone full of indifference. Fate said, I will meet disaster today. Let me see if you are the man of fate. Clang. The crisp sound of blades came out. The long knife at Hawkins' waist was slowly unsheathed. In the next second, he whispered something in a deep voice. Straw knife. The sound of Kingming echoed, and the blade of the long knife in Hawkins' hand suddenly twisted and deformed. In the next second, the blade twisted and turned into a sharp straw. Faced with this sudden scene, the captain of the hostile pirate group below was shocked. But he didn't wait for his reaction. The long knife that turned into straw stabbed towards him fiercely. Shua! The whistling sound resounded through the air. It was also when the captain of the hostile pirate group was stupefied that a strong figure ran out from one side abruptly, blocking his own captain. Sheila! Puff! The sharp straw blade pierced through the strong man's body on the spot. Bright red blood flowed out along the blade. Hawkins narrowed his eyes slightly. The hostile captain, after recognizing the man whose chest was pierced, widened his eyes and said with surprise and anger, "Toba." The man named Tuoba was bleeding from his mouth, and the group turned back to look at their captain. "Take your brothers and run away, Captain Jara. We are not in the same weight class as them at all. We can't win the fight. If the fight continues, all the brothers will die here." The other party is Basil Hawkins, the magician who offered a reward of 249 million Baileys. Ahem. As he spoke, Tuoba suddenly felt a sweetness in his throat, and suddenly coughed up a big mouthful of blood. Facing this scene, Jara's pupils immediately became bloodshot and red. But when he was about to save Toba, Hawkins suddenly pulled out the grass knife. Shoo! Bah! The drawn grass knife brought out a large amount of blood. Toba also fell directly to the ground. Thump! Jela's eyes were red, looking at Hawkins and roaring angrily. "I will definitely kill you today." Jara was about to run towards Hawkins with a knife in his hand, but he was stopped by his crew just as he took a step. "Captain, let's go. We are not their opponents, and it will be too late if we don't go." "Yes, Captain. Come on. We're here to kill you. You can't die, Captain Jara. You have to save your life to avenge us." As the words rose, more and more people guarded Jila behind him. Hawkins watched this scene calmly, but a bit of disgust rose in his heart. "Don't make me look like a sinner. You are the first to attack us." It was also during Hawkins' calm statement that the members of the Hawkins pirates also protected Hawkins behind them. Immediately afterwards, fierce fighting broke out again. Everyone slammed into a ball again. Kill. The Jara pirates were defeated by the Hawkins pirates. Jela finally recognized the facts, and began to retreat while fighting. At this time, a member of the Hawkins pirates in a black robe ran to Hawkins' side. "Captain, do you want to chase?" Hawkins raised his head indifferently, looking at the beaten Gela pirates who were retreating, and said coldly, "I saw death in their faces." Upon hearing Hawkins' words, the crew immediately showed an excited expression on their faces. "Understood, Captain." After speaking, he returned to the battlefield excitedly with the knife in his hand, and at the same time he did not forget to shout loudly, "Death has already appeared on their faces, kill them all." As soon as these words came out, the morale of the Hawkins pirates soared. The crew members of the Jara pirates fell into a pool of blood one after another. Hawkins stood where he was, looking coldly at the Jara pirates, whose number was now only a dozen or so, and muttered to himself, "Will my catastrophe be them? Just by them, just by that knife. Reversed, world, card, end. Begin. Is that all? It seems that you are not the destined person." Whispering, Hawkins put away the knife. "It's the result of my divination. Is something wrong? But if that's the case, then what's the matter with the strong uneasiness in my heart?" His eyes fell on Jara again, and Hawkins' expression was extremely cold. However, it is also at this time he suddenly saw the faces of his crew members. At this first glance, Hawkins was stunned for a moment, thinking that he had misread it. But the next second after he took a closer look, his eyes widened. As this, death. It was also at this moment that Hawkins's ancient and calm face finally showed an obvious change. It was shocking, terrifying, unbelievable. So it's like this, all of their faces have death looks. So many people will die at the hands of a dozen of them. Looking at the remaining 10 or so members of the Jara pirates, Hawkins looked a little astonished. But the next second, there was a sudden feeling in his heart, and an idea subconsciously popped up in his mind. Coming. Hawkins turned his head abruptly, and looked towards the sea on Ling's side. This look, Hawkins immediately found out. On the sea not far away, there is a ship slowly sailing towards this side. That is a pirate ship with the same skull flag flying high. On the top of the mast, the flag flutters. The pattern of the flag is the picture of a double-scythe skull. And this is exactly the pattern that symbolizes the battle against the pirates. Just seeing the ship for the first time, Hawkins' pupils shrank uncontrollably. His eyes trembled violently like an earthquake. He, who had always looked calm, now looked terrified. Because the first time he saw the ship, Hawkins knew that that was exactly what he was worried about, fearful and uneasy. Life and death catastrophe. Now, he really came, as predicted by the divination. At the same time, in the battle against the pirates. It's very lively ahead. Hungry Wolf's voice came leisurely. Jang J, Cypher, Yuan Yi, Yi Ji Yu Yu Tai, Tian Dao Pain, Obito, Hungry Wolf, Fina, Mona, and Luchini and other handymen. At this moment, it also slowly came to the deck. Jang J stood on the bow of the ship slightly higher, looked at the knot far away, and smiled slightly at the ships that were close together and engaged in fierce battles. It's really lively. Hungry Wolf stepped forward a few steps, flexed his muscles and bones a little, and asked a question. Captain, are we going to get involved? We haven't moved our muscles for a few days, and I feel like I'm a little rusty. There was a smile on Jang J's face. Of course, since we have encountered such a lively event. How can I miss it? If this situation is encountered in the future, Jang J might be lazy to answer. But now, Yangshi will never miss it. For him now, the combat value is very lacking. It coincides with this situation where the next conqueror can be summoned with more than 1,000 combat points. Jang J couldn't miss the opportunity in front of him. A regular pirate group can bring 200 to 300 battle points to Jang J. 2 boats cost 500 to 600. Although it is a little small, the mosquitoes are also small and meaty. If there are more, they will naturally be full. Besides, the gap in combat value that Jang J needs now is not very big. Furthermore, one of the two ships, Jang J, looks very familiar. The familiar pirate flag pattern, the recognizable straw bow. Isn't it one of the supernovas in the extremely evil generation? The Basil Hawkins of the Magician. Although I forgot the specific bounty offered by the other party, at least it was more than 100 million. And Jang J believes that if Basil Hawkins is solved, he will definitely get a generous reward. That is when Jang J said that he was involved in this battle. Luchini, who was at the back, was a little uneasy. She walked out slowly, and reminded her with some hesitation. That ship with the head of a scarecrow is not simple. If I remember correctly, that is also a big pirate group with a reward of over 100 million, and their captain is quite famous on this Grand Line. As soon as Luchini said this, Hungry Wolf and the others all turned their heads to look at her. Even Fei Na, who was on the side, heard that there was a big pirate who was offering a reward of over 100 million like the captain and boss. I couldn't help but be surprised. The reward is over 100 million, because of the pirate. Is his reward higher than the captain's boss? Looking into Fina's gaze, Luchini's expression was serious. No, his reward is 249 million Baileys, but he is undoubtedly a powerful pirate, nicknamed Magician. I've heard of the reputation a long time ago. Their background is very deep, and their strength is far beyond the comparison of ordinary pirates. It's just that Fina doesn't care about the background or not. When I heard that the other party's reward was much lower than that of the captain's boss, Fina immediately slapped her thigh and said, "What are you afraid of? It's just a pirate with a reward of 249 million. The captain's boss is 490 million Baileys, which is more than 200 million higher than him." Hearing this, Luchini frowned in displeasure. "What do you know as a child?" Fina's eyes widened, wanting to refute Luchini. But for a while, she didn't know how to refute. Just at this moment, Jang J's chuckle interrupted their words. "Hee, you mean to say that the other party became famous earlier than us, and has a deeper background than us? Even if I have a reward of 490 million Baileys, if I go to trouble with them, is it making me unhappy?" Seeing that Jang J was so straightforward, he said what he meant. The blood on Luchini's face suddenly receded, turning pale. This is obviously an accident that didn't take her words seriously at all, and even sneered at her words. Luchini, who understood this, was terrified. The voice trembled and whispered back, "No. I want to say that the opponent's strength may not be weak." Jang J smiled disdainfully. Weak explanation. Cold sweat flowed from Luchini's forehead, and the strong fear of Jang J made her subconsciously take a step back. But at this time, Jang J's voice came again. Forget it, let you see it. Let's see what is strong and what is strength. It also makes you understand a truth. He offered a reward of 249 million Baileys because he is worth 249 million Baileys. And I offer a reward of 490 million Baileys, and my crew offers a reward of 10 million Baileys. Because they only saw the 490 million Bailey side of me, the 10 million Bailey side of my crew. As soon as Jang J said these words, immediately, Fina's eyes sparkled and she nodded her head. Jang J looked back at the two pirate ships not far away. But this time, Jang J saw a conspicuous person. He stood by the railing of the boat, watching Jang J from a distance. Seeing that eye-catching long golden hair, Jang J roughly guessed that he was the magician, Basil Hawkins. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Jang J slowly raised his hand, pointing his index finger at the two pirate ships. The other side, Hawkins, who was on his own boat, looked at the young man in gray shirt on the bow of the boat not far away. It turns out that my catastrophe is you. The captain has a 490 million Bailey bounty to fight the pirates. Perhaps my destiny has already been written by the goddess. But if I were to hand over my life and death to a miracle, it would be absolutely impossible. I will bestow stubborn resistance, and personally open up a way of survival, and open up the one with the highest survival rate. Mumbling to himself, Hawkins' tone became firm. But at this moment, he suddenly saw the young man in a gray shirt, slowly raised his hand, and pointed his fingertips at himself. In the next moment, the fingertips of the gray-shirted youth shone red. Buzz! The sound of Kingming echoed in all directions. At this very moment, Tien suddenly descended a terrifying aura covering the entire sea area. Boom! The moment he felt this terrifying breath, Hawkins' breathing suddenly stagnated. The pupils shrank sharply at this moment, and the body trembled violently like chaff. Even the originally determined expression on his face changed into boundless panic in an instant. Without any hesitation, Hawkins turned and ran. Even if the other side of the boat is the sea, even if he is a person with fruit ability, he is a landlubber. Hawkins also jumped into the sea without hesitation. And the other side, Jang J, who was on the bow, had red lights on his fingertips, shining like he was breathing. The terrifying aura that is so powerful that it makes people tremble is frantic and condensed rapidly. After a while, Jang J whispered something in a deep voice. Void flash. Boom. The crimson flash shot out along with that huge roar. Like a beam of red light, it instantly hit the two pirate ships not far away. Boom boom. The two pirate ships turned into fly ash in an instant. The entire sky was glowed red because of the Sero released by Jang J. Sero's power was not weakened by hitting two pirate ships. Under that formidable power and strength, the resistance of the pirate ship is like a bubble. Sero also continued to push forward while destroying the pirate ship. Boom! Under the power of Sero, two rows of huge waves with a height of tens of meters were set off on the sea surface. For a moment, the fish and beasts in the deep sea were frightened and fled in all directions. On the surface of the sea, the waves are churning endlessly, and the strong wind is blowing. Hulonglong! Even behind Jang J, Luchini and the others were almost thrown out by the strong wind caused by Sero. He could only raise his hand to resist in embarrassment, gritted his teeth and half bowed on the ground, so he managed not to be thrown out. As for Fina and Magna, there are 22 people. After a scream, it was directly blown away by the strong wind. Ah! Yuan on one side immediately moved when he saw this. With just a flash of figure, Yuan Yi instantly appeared behind Fina and Magna, and caught them both with his hands. Sero didn't last long, but in just 2 or 3 seconds, Jang J stopped. The surrounding area quickly returned to calm. Luchini, who was half bent on the ground, recalled the terrifying breath and the strong wind just now. The whole person is not calm anymore. Her eyes trembled violently like an earthquake, and Luchini's face was filled with that unprecedented expression of horror. What kind of powerful terrorist attack is this? Just feeling it, my body is already trembling, let alone facing a terrifying blow. It was also at this moment that Luchini's thoughts suddenly became clear. That's right, so that's it. That's not an earthquake at all. The horror and shock we felt in the prison below, the ruins on the surface, and the sea river that suddenly appeared. So they did it. So, they destroyed that marine base, that island. Knowing this, 2 lines of hot tears suddenly flowed from Luchini's eyes. I just don't know if it's fear or sudden realization. Behind Luchini, Augustus and Jara could not calm down at this moment, looking at the ship that was in smoke in an instant. The impact of the scene in front of them was too great. So much so that his pupils trembled uncontrollably. I'm not dreaming. The magician who offered a bounty of 249 million Baileys, Basil Hawkins, was dealt with just like this. Not even a scum left. Is that a lie? These guys, what kind of monsters are they? With just 1 hit, they wiped out the big pirate with a reward of over 100 million. Is this godlike power really something that humans can possess? While speaking, the bodies of Jara and Augustus were already trembling. It was also after Jang J's blow that they once again refreshed their understanding of the pirates. At the same time, he also had an unparalleled strong fear of Jang J, and even the entire warring pirate group. These guys in front of me are simply a group of monsters. Rear. Fina's short hair was blown upside down by the strong wind, and she said in a confused tone, is it over? Yuan Yi, who was carrying the 2 sisters, put them down slowly, and reminded them calmly. More powerful ones are coming. Fina still hasn't realized what Yuan Yi's words mean. Suddenly, at the end of the line of sight, a huge white mushroom cloud rose. What followed immediately was the terrifying air wave that was visible to the naked eye and engulfed the atomized sea water. Boom! The roar of the explosion came long after. Heavenly Dao Pain in the back jumped forward and came to the front. Looking at the terrifying air wave that swept over, he slowly raised his hand. In the next second, his Rinnegan eyes were slightly opened, the power of heaven unfolded, and the strong repulsive force moved forward. In the blink of an eye, the terrifying air waves that arrived collided violently. Boom! Even the air wave caused a deafening roar at this moment. On the calm sea, the raging waves churned again. The ships fighting against the pirates also experienced violent turmoil. Boom! At the same time, in a certain unknown island town. More than a dozen people are working, or are laughing with their friends. At this moment, his eyes suddenly stared, and then a large piece of his body exploded abruptly, bleeding to death directly. Bang, 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 puff, puff. Some of them lost their heads directly, or directly lost the lower body below the chest, or directly lost the upper body above the calf. But the same thing is that they all died in an instant and lost their vitality. The people around who witnessed all this, first experienced a short period of astonishment. Then revealed that incomparable frightened expression. Harsh screams resounded throughout the town, and people fled in panic. On the sea, fight against the pirates. The aftermath of the explosion lasted several minutes. However, in these few minutes, there were no previous terrifying blasts and winds. There are only raging waves churning above the sea. But that soon gradually calmed down. Ding! Congratulations to host for getting plus 1200 combat value. Conquest value. 6400. On the deck of the ship. In Jang J's mind, the system's notification sound came again. Hearing the number of combat points obtained this time, Jang J couldn't help showing a smile on his face. 1200 points. Just right. A thought arose in his heart, and Jang J had nothing to hesitate. He came directly to the lottery page of the system and conducted a lottery draw. Ding! Battle value minus 6400. Ding! Congratulations to host for summoning the Conqueror from the world of Hokage, Uchiha M. Hearing the system say the name of this expedition, Jang J's eyes narrowed slightly. Immediately afterwards, there was another series of announcements from the system. Ding! Congratulations to host, successfully extracted the ability of the Conqueror, Uchiha M. Ding! Congratulations to host for getting the skill, Fire Style Fire Extinction. Ding! Congratulations to host for getting the skill, Fire Style is gone. Ding! Congratulations to host for acquiring the skill, Wood Style the Birth of the Tree Realm. Ding! Congratulations to host for acquiring the skill, Wood Style Wood Dragon Technique. Ding! Congratulations to host for acquiring the skill, Tengai Shinsei. Ding! Congratulations to host for gaining abilities, Susano. Ding! Congratulations to host for gaining the ability, Sealing Technique Absorption. Host, Jang J. Battle Value, 0. Item, None. Conqueror, Obito Yuta, Uchiha Obito, Hungry Wolf, and Pen Tiandao. Jiguyueni, Ulquiorra Cipher, Uchiha Madara. Lottery entrance close double angle bracket. It was also when Jang J was listening to the system prompt. Suddenly, Fina's flustered voice came from behind him. Ah, everyone, look over there, there's a man over there. And it looks like he's coming after us. As soon as Fina's exclamation came, everyone on the deck subconsciously looked in the direction she pointed. Even Jang J recovered from the listening and looked in the direction Fina pointed. Ha! The cool sea breeze blows by. A small wooden boat located behind the side of the ship caught everyone's eyes. There was another person sitting on the wooden boat. One is wearing a red armor, has long black hair, and has purple eyes with circles of black rings. Wooden boat. That guy just rides on that kind of thing, sailing on this sea. Augustus looked at the man in red armor, riding a small wooden boat no more than 2 meters away, with a look of astonishment on his face. Gro also leaned over at this time, and said with a serious expression. To be able to travel alone in a canoe on this Weihang road, this guy is absolutely extraordinary. Luchini, who was on the side, also agreed with Jara's point of view. The level of danger on the Grand Line far surpasses that of the whole world. Also, even if the 4 seas are less dangerous than the Grand Line, it's still rare for a guy to sail alone in a small canoe. Let alone on the Grand Line. If there is no strength, there will be no bones left. Augustus glanced sideways at the two of them. That's not the problem, is it? His sailing direction seems to be heading straight for us. While everyone was discussing, on the wooden boat, the man wearing a red armor also stood up slowly at this moment. He glanced at the wooden boat under his feet. As if he thought its speed was too slow, the armored man immediately took a step forward, stepping on the surface of the sea. Walked straight towards the boat of Jang J and others. With slightly undulating sea surface, the armored man's feet are like the ground. And the boat not far away. Luchini and the others saw with their own eyes the armored man stepping on the water, walking on the surface of the sea as if walking on flat ground. Immediately, he was so startled that he gasped and his breath stagnated. Hey, is this serious? That guy actually walked on the surface of the sea. Am I dazzled? Liar. When they were horrified, Luchini and the others instinctively looked at Jang J who was at the side. The 3 who wanted to see how Jang J would respond to this. But at this moment, a faint smile was seen on Jang J's face. Here we come. The murmur spread. It made Luchini and the others startled. At this time, Fina who was on the 10 side also looked at Ueni curiously. Come here, does the captain know the guy in the boat? Well, he is the captain's crew. Yuan nodded and responded calmly. He's also the captain's boss. Fina's eyes flickered with starlight, her face full of surprise. Looking at the man stepping on the sea again, Fina became a little excited unknowingly. Amazing. Walking on the water is as good as walking on the ground. As expected of the crew of the captain's boss, you can see that he is a powerful guy. And Luchini and the others also heard what Yuan Yi said. After the man wearing a red armor and walking on the sea was Jang J, he calmed down a little. After walking a certain distance on the sea, and getting closer to the ship, the man in red armor jumped onto Jang J's boat. Whoosh. There was a crisp sound as the red armor collided. Madara landed on the deck smoothly, then stood up slowly, and greeted Jang J. Captain. On one side, the gazes of Luchini, Augustus, Jara, Fina and others all fell on Madara at this moment. They had just been far apart on the sea, and their feelings for Madara were not real. But now, with Madara on board, they also clearly felt the oppressive feeling emanating from Madara's body. And its crew members, it brings them a different feeling. The other crew members are not much different from ordinary people in their feelings. And this man who had just boarded the ship and was wearing a red armor. There is obviously a strong and intimidating aura on his body. This is the complete opposite of Cypher and other crew members who are restrained and not sharp. But for any individual, as long as they see this man in red armor, then instinctively and clearly recognize that the other party is a conqueror. Luchini, Augustus, and Jara, who have experienced life and death battles, are even more so. Instinctive intuition is warning them. Danger, danger, danger. The man in front of me is very powerful. And it's very dangerous. If there is a battle conflict with him, he will usher in a certain death situation. Get away from him. Stay away from this dangerous guy. Luchini, Augustus, and Jara trembled in their hearts, and a thought came to them at the same time. Several days have passed since Madara boarded the ship. After lunch one day, located in the restaurant on the second floor of the ship, Fina was in a good mood, humming a ditty while cleaning the table after dinner. She cleaned with her, as well as Luchini, Augustus and Gros Sans. As for Mona, she was not idle either. Under Fina's previous leadership, even Magna is already very familiar with serving tea and pouring water. At this time, the crew members of the pirates were on the deck, either playing cards, fishing, or other competitions. And Mona was watching from the sidelines, waiting for the crew members to help when they needed help. Recently, have you been learning swordsmanship from that man? Suddenly, a voice of inquiry came from behind Fina. Fina was slightly taken aback, then looked back. When she saw that it was Luchini, she smiled and readily admitted. You mean big brother Yuan? Yes. Hearing Fina call Yuani the eldest brother, Luchini's face changed slightly, and then asked again. A duel with Uchiha cipher? Fina nodded with a smile on her face. Why, they said they would let you disembark at the next stop. Luchini frowned. Hearing this, Fina also reacted and said with a smile on her face. Well, I know what you want to ask. You probably don't know it yet. A long time ago, I begged the captain and boss to let me stay and let me become one of them. Later the captain gave me a chance, as long as I knocked down that Uchiha cipher, he let me join them. As soon as Fina said this, not only Luchini, but even Augustus and Jara on the side were shocked when they heard it. What, you want to stay, and be one of them? Don't you want to live? Luchini shouted with a solemn face and a low tone. But Fina didn't care about it, instead she asked with a smile. Why do you say that? Luchini said solemnly. Don't be deceived by their appearance, they are not as good as you think. You should know this from the fact that they wanted to throw you into the sea to feed the fish after you sneaked into the boat and were discovered. Listen to my advice. Don't stay here, this is not the land of tenderness, but hell. Leaving the pirates and this ship was a dream for the three of Luchini. But they can't go. The more they saw the horror of the pirates, the more they felt that it was impossible to escape. Once there are signs of escaping, death may directly greet them. If he died directly, that would be fine. It's scary because I'm afraid I won't be able to survive, and I won't be able to die. You know, it is now located at the bottom of the cabin. In that small dark room. There is also a half-dead person lingering in it. But I don't think this is hell. The smile on Fina's face remained. Hearing this, Luchini sighed softly. You are still too young, you are too obsessed with appearances, and there are many things you don't understand at all. Why do you think Augustus and Jara are blind in their left and right eyes? Why do you think the other two handymen suddenly disappeared? Do you think they left the pirates' conquest? No, what they are facing is even more miserable than leaving the pirates. Hear this. Fina raised her hand with a smile, stopped Luchini from continuing to speak, and asked back. Have you ever eaten stinky food on the street? Have you ever eaten wriggling worms? Have you ever gnawed on a fruit peel full of mud? Have you ever seen a child starve to death? Do you know what it's like to be hungry? Do you know what it's like to find a little food after being hungry for a few days, only to be snatched away? Compared with those, isn't this a paradise? Listening to Fina's words, Luchini frowned. You don't understand, this ship is a real hell. As for the place you mentioned, you only need to work to ensure the most basic food and clothing. Here, you, Jang, may face death if you are not careful. It was also at the moment when Luchini said this. For the first time, Fina showed an angry look on her face, and the veins on her forehead were also bulging. As long as you work hard, you can guarantee the most basic food and clothing. Do you know how ridiculous this is to a child and a street child? They hate us and keep us away as rats. Some even treat us as free labor. After working for a day, I didn't even get a bite to eat. Even if I begged hard, I still ended up being kicked out. Adults are greedy. In the middle of the conversation, Fina's words suddenly stopped. In the next second, she calmed down. The anger on his face also dissipated, and a smile appeared. Forget it, what am I talking about? After finishing speaking, Fina continued to hum a ditty and began to wipe the table. And Luchini, after a moment of silence, spoke again. Every place is different, and the ones you encounter are very few. When you get to the next place, you will live a real life there, instead of living like a slave in this hell. Fina smiled and spoke calmly. Sister Luchini, you don't have to persuade me, I won't understand you. Just as you can't understand me. Until Fina's decisive words fell. This topic has come to an end. Because no matter what kind of persuasion it is destined to be meaningless. After cleaning, Fina excitedly ran to say hello to Jang J, and then went to Yuanyi to learn swordsmanship. The time came in the afternoon. Da 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 da. The sound of footsteps echoed in the corridor in the cabin. Luchini walked along the corridor alone and came to the door of Jang J's room. Boom boom boom. There was a knock on the door. Then Jang J's voice came from the room. What's up? Luchini lowered her head in fear, her voice trembling slightly. He died. Then throw it into the sea, and go if you have nothing else to do. Came Jang J's nonchalant voice. Luchini opened the mouth to speak. And, one more thing. There are not many basic supplies on board, and they will be exhausted in about 5 or 6 days. Do you need to change the waterway and dock to replenish supplies? Above this sea, one cannot die of starvation. Things like docking to replenish supplies can be made up or not. Of course, if you don't want to eat only fish every day and live a life without alcohol, seasonings and other daily necessities, it's best to go ashore to replenish some. 3 days later, on the ship of the pirate group, Luchini came to the cabin once and came to the door where Jang J's room was located. Captain, I can already see the island. Through the door, Luchini said something softly. Inside the door, Jang J stood up slowly, walked towards the door and responded with a sound. I see. At the same time, on the deck of the ship, Fina looked at the island a little far away, and her body trembled slightly with nervousness. Because, this will be her last and most formal challenge to Cypher. Brother Yuan, do you think I have a chance to defeat Brother Cypher? Yuani, who was standing aside, heard the words, glanced at Fina, and responded in a cold tone. No, no hope at all, Fina asked again unwillingly. Yuani thought about it. Perhaps, you can look forward to the so-called miracle. Da da da. Footsteps came from behind. Fina looked back and saw Jang J, Cypher and Luchini slowly walking out of the cabin. Jang J walked to one side, and Cypher went straight to Fina. Coming to the railing of the boat, Jang J turned and looked at Cypher and Fina in the center. Just at this time, Madara, who was sitting on the rail beside Jang J, with one fist on his cheek, he said leisurely in a playful tone. Interesting. Even if you are as weak as an ant, do you still have a heart that wants to dance? Jang J, who was on the side, also showed a smile when he heard the words. You like her? Madara glanced at Fina and shook her head contemptuously. No, I was just thinking that her dancing might not be too ugly. Jang J leaned against the railing of the boat, and said with a gentle smile. Maybe. With his hands in his pockets, Cypher stopped about 5 meters away from Fina with his usual icy expression. Are you ready? Fina took a few deep breaths and squeezed out a smile. Hey, I'm ready. Brother Cypher, you have to be gentle this time, please be merciful. Fina had just finished speaking. Something unexpected happened to her. Cypher actually agreed. Good. When she heard that Cypher wanted to be merciful, Fina regained her spirits instantly. Then I can come. Gritting her teeth, Fina greeted Cypher and rushed towards Cypher. It was also the moment when Fina rushed towards Cypher. An invisible Reiatsu surged out of Cypher's body. Boom. Even Cypher had held Reiatsu low. But in Fina's perception, that power is still incomparably powerful and terrifying. Almost the moment Reiatsu was released, Fina felt her body sinking, and then fell to the ground violently. Boom, clang, boom. Reiatsu's oppression continues. Fina's whole body seemed to be glued to the ground, and she couldn't even stand up at the most basic level. Overlooking Fina, who was lying on the ground, Cypher's voice was indifferent and calm. You lose. But as soon as Cypher's voice fell, Fina immediately retorted. Not yet. The battle is not over yet, I can still fight. I haven't lost yet. As she spoke, Fina gritted her teeth, propped her hands on the ground, and wanted to stand up angrily. Drink. Also at this moment, Fina's whole body became red with blood. Even the blue veins were highlighted at the same moment. One can imagine what terrifying coercion she is facing at this moment. And how she longed to be able to stand up. Unfortunately, Cypher did not stop because of this. He just stood there quietly, overlooking the struggling Fina. Time passed for a while. Fina also failed to stand up on the ground. Various emotions such as urgency, despair, unwillingness, etc. poured out in Fina's heart. It made Fina's eyes bloodshot and red. Blood oozed from the mouth. Gritting her teeth tightly, Fina looked at her hands and legs and shouted angrily. Stand up. Fina shouted angrily, and once again broke out with all her strength, trying to stand up. But in the next second, her body revealed her overwhelmed earlier than her will. Fina only felt a sweetness in her throat, and then coughed up a big mouthful of blood. Cough, puff, a large pool of bright red blood was sprayed on the deck. The ground was stained red. Jang J, who saw this scene, also stood up slowly at this moment. A verdict has been passed on this battle that has ended before it even started. Okay, it's over. You disembark when the ship docks. Cypher restrained Reiatsu upon hearing the sound. But Fina was kneeling on the ground. Though without Reiatsu's oppression, but Fina felt that her body was heavier than when she was pressed by Reiatsu. Looking at the pool of blood that he coughed up on the deck, Fina bit her lips tightly, tears welling in her eyes. It was also at that moment that Fina understood the existence of miracles. I also understand how huge the gap in strength between myself and Cypher is. 0. Facing such a powerful opponent, it is impossible for him to defeat the opponent no matter what. This was an impossible thing from the beginning. It's just like she wants to join the pirates' conquest. So far, Fina sobbed uncontrollably, and big teardrops dripped down. She could only desperately wipe away her tears. He didn't dare to look up, and he didn't dare to cry. The departure after docking is a foregone conclusion. As time goes by, the battle pirate group is getting closer and closer to that island. The ship also ushered in silence after a long absence. Fina and Magna are no longer arguing. Fina squatted beside the boat rail with a dull expression, while Magna quietly accompanied her. Jang J stood in front of the bow, gazing in the direction of the island, as if he was looking at something. Also staring at the direction of the island, there are Enichi, Cypher, Obito, Pain, Hungry Wolf, Obito Yuta and Madara. Their gazes were all staring in the direction of the island, watching what was happening. Over there, a very interesting thing seems to have happened. Hungry Wolf smiled and said yo-yo. Obito on the side also narrowed his eyes slightly at this time and said, guys who claim to be righteous are taking their lives for fun. Am I not mistaken? It's interesting, Jang J said jokingly. At the same time, the gaze direction of Jang J et al. Located in the offshore waters of that island. Oh oh oh, ha 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 ha, not bad, not bad, another hit, another hit. Playful laughter echoed on a large warship. Below the large warship, there are still 7 small wooden boats. There are 2 people sitting on each wooden boat. Without exception, they all paddled frantically towards the shore with boundless fear. Hurry up, row faster, I don't want to die yet. Hurry up and row me. Shouts of terror came from above the wooden boat. The person on the warship, however, heard the terrified shout and felt happy physically and mentally. The appearance of these untouchables is really interesting, hee 520, hey. On the deck of the warship, a woman wearing a luxurious dress and a bubble hood said with a smile. Beside the woman stood 2 men who also wore luxurious clothes and bubble hoods. One of them echoed the words and said, it's really pleasant to see how scared they are. The other person, on the other hand, noticed the stopped artillery fire. This can't help but make him frown a little displeased, and said in a deep voice behind him, huh? What's the matter? Keep firing, sink them. As the man's words fell, soon, a general wearing Marine Admiral quickly walked up to the man wearing a bubble hood. With an ugly face, he lowered his head and said, we can't continue to fire, The people are already angry, and if this continues, there will be chaos. At this time, the shore was already full of people. They looked at the people on that warship with complex emotions of anger, fear on their faces. The bloody young man clenched his fists tightly, and the veins on his forehead bulged. The man wearing the bubble hood frowned after hearing General Marine's words. He didn't even look at the crowd gathered on the shore. Then he spoke to General Marine, his tone full of silence. "What did you say? Can't fire. Who do you think you are? How dare you restrict my freedom?" As soon as these words came out, the Marine general immediately lowered his head in fear. "No. Dare not." The man wearing the bubble hood tilted his head slightly, overlooking the Marine general proudly. "Tell him, are the emotions of the untouchables more important, or our happiness?" The man in the bubble hood said those words. A burly man in a black suit and sunglasses on one side came out immediately and said in a cold voice, "Of course your happiness is more important. The untouchables are always the untouchables, so how can they compare with the venerable celestial dragons? As long as you are happy and willing, these untouchables are all dead, and they are all their honorable subjects." Listening to the man in the suit, celestial dragons nodded in satisfaction. At the same time, he shouted angrily at the Marine general, "You also go down to the wooden boat." When General Marine heard this, his pupils shrank suddenly. However, before he opened his mouth to say anything, the burly man in a suit standing on the side of celestial dragons grabbed him and threw him out of the warship. "Call out." "Ah!" Boom! The Marine general screamed and fell into the sea. On the faces of the three celestial dragons, smiles once again overflowed and ordered, "Fire and sink them all." The man in the black suit heard the words and looked back. Those sailors in front of the naval guns, being stared at by the man in the suit, immediately shuddered in fear and began to load the shells. They don't want to be the next to be targeted by naval guns. Bang, bang, bang. Soon, the huge shelling sounded again. The muzzle fire on the warship burst into flames, and several shells shot out in unison, hitting the small wooden boat on the sea surface. Boom, ah, boom, boom. This round of artillery fire hit two wooden ships one after another. The people on the wooden boat were blown up and flew out screaming. Seeing the celestial dragons on the deck, all of them looked happy. Applause. "Okay, hit again. Ha ha ha, this is so funny. You actually hit two ships in a row, not bad. Not bad. Hurry up, don't let those 5 ships escape. If they escape, then you will go down instead." As soon as celestial dragons said this, the gunners all shuddered. Immediately afterwards, they quickly loaded the shells. And this time, those who rowed in small wooden boats will not be so lucky to escape round after round of shelling. Bang, bang, bang. Another salvo. The muzzle fire of the naval gun shot out, and countless shells shot out. It is in the crucial scene. Standing behind the celestial dragons was a burly man in a black suit and sunglasses. Suddenly, he saw something. This made him subconsciously turn his head and look in that direction. After taking a look, he was shocked to find that what he saw out of the corner of his eye was actually a pirate ship. "Pirates!" The murmur of a burly man was heard. The female celestial dragons not far in front of him suddenly became energetic. In the next second, she turned her head abruptly and asked excitedly, "Pirate, where? I just want to get some new slaves. If it's a pirate, it's perfect." Seeing female celestial dragons take interest, the burly man in a black suit immediately bowed slightly and pointed to where the pirate was. "Look over there, your new slave is coming your way." The female celestial dragons showed a smirk on their face, turned their heads and shouted at the Marines behind. "Hey, Marine, capture those pirates alive for me. I'm going to make them my new slaves." Meanwhile, the other side. The person on the pirate ship who was targeted by the celestial dragons. It is Jang J and his party who are fighting against the pirates. Hearing that the other party actually said that he wanted his group to be her slaves, Jang J, Hungry Wolf, Obito, and Madara were all startled. Immediately there was a sinister smile on his face, and he said in a deep voice, "Interesting. Madara, you want me to be a slave? This is the first time I've heard that in my life." Looking at the warship a little far away, Hungry Wolf suddenly remembered something, then turned his head to look at Jang J who was at the side and said, "Don't just deal with them this time, Captain." Hearing this, Jang J just turned his head and looked at Hungry Wolf. Then he looked at the warship a little further away again, and at the same time Shen Sheng responded to this. Relax. They don't deserve that kind of easy death. From the rear, upon hearing Jang J and the others were about to kill again, Luchini, Augustus and Jara were so frightened that their hearts jumped into their throats. Augustus even subconsciously took a step forward. Wait, please wait, Captain. Calm down, Captain, Jara quickly echoed. Luchini directly pointed out the core problem. Captain, that warship is different from ordinary marine warships. Look at the flags on their mast sails, it's not a picture of a blue seagull spreading its wings. It's a cross with 5 blue dots connected. This is the flag that symbolizes the world government. Jang J and others looked back when they heard the sound. Before he had time to speak, he heard Augustus speaking urgently from the side. Those 3 people wearing bubble hoods are the nobles of that world, celestial dragons. If you attack them, Marine Admiral will be called. If you kill them, the consequences will be even more serious. Because this kind of behavior is tantamount to declaring war on the world government. This will not only attract Marine Admiral, but will also be encircled and suppressed by the world government. So, facing the celestial dragons, flee. Before Augustus could finish speaking, Jang J's icy voice came leisurely. You think I don't know? The tongue is for talking, but not for talking nonsense. If you 3 don't want it anymore, then cut it off. As soon as these words came out, Luchini and the others shuddered in fright. In the next second, they all shut their mouths. He lowered his head, not daring to take a breath. On the other hand, thanks to the emergence of Jang J et al., the 3 celestial dragons also shifted their targets from civilians to Jang J's warring pirate group. Gunners right in front of the ship's guns. After receiving the order from the celestial dragons, he secretly breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Shelling civilians and killing innocent lives makes them feel guilty. At the same time, it will be unbearable. But they won't do things like shelling pirates. Whether it's shelling pirates, killing pirates, or catching pirates, this is what they are good at. Is where the business is. And compared to killing civilians, killing pirates is more exciting for them. Quick, turn around, calibrate the muzzle, target pirate ship. The sound of hurried footsteps and shouts echoed above the deck. All the Marines looked extremely serious at this moment, and everyone started to get busy. Pirate, Marine, this kind of battle must be more interesting than bombarding those untouchables. The female celestial dragons covered her mouth and chuckled. A male celestial dragons on the side also said with a smile on his face. I hope these pirates are not too weak. That's right, if it's a one-sided battle, it's too boring. It's interesting only if you have to fight with each other. Another celestial dragons also echoed at this time. Also this little kung fu that celestial dragons talks about. The naval guns on the warship's side have all been adjusted and calibrated. Fire. Following the order of General Marine. All the gunners fired together. Bang, bang, bang. All of a sudden, the guns of the warship burst into flames, and dozens of shells shot towards Jang J and others. Whoa, 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 on the shores of island towns. The people who had gathered on the shore a long time ago saw that the target of the celestial dragons had become the group of pirates. He immediately extended a helping hand to those civilians who survived by chance on the sea. Thankfully, these pirates showed up at the right time. Everyone, give your hand and pull them up. Quick, come up quickly. It's really time to thank these pirates. Yeah, it's great that they showed up, but it would have been better if they had appeared earlier. The other side, battle on the deck of the pirates. Listening to the piercing whistling sound of the shells in the air. All the members of the battle pirates raised their heads and looked at the bombardment that hit the sky. Seeing this, Madara's face was calm. But there was contempt in that calm tone. I thought it would be a big deal. It turned out to be a big disappointment. While speaking, Madara slowly raised her hand, and whispered with one hand. Wood-style wood dragon technique. Boom. The moment Madara's voice fell, there was a loud noise from the hull of the ship fighting against the pirates. In the next second, a huge wooden dragon jumped out of the deck and flew straight into the air. Boom. Luchini, Fina and others in the rear, looking at the carpenter who suddenly jumped out from the deck and was extremely huge. They were all terrified physically and mentally, and their pupils trembled violently. Dragon, how can this be? On the deck, a wooden dragon appeared out of thin air. What kind of joke is this? They looked at the wooden dragon jumping out from the deck, their faces were full of unbelievable horror. But it hasn't waited for them to be soothed from the horror in their hearts because of the sudden appearance of the wooden dragon. Next second, they also saw the huge wooden dragon roaring and rushing towards the shells that filled the sky. Roar, whoosh, but in an instant, the dozens of shells in the air were swallowed by the wooden dragon in one gulp. Boom, a dull explosion sounded from the wooden dragon's mouth. What followed was thick black smoke that overflowed from the mouth of the dragon after the shell exploded. Quote, even if the shell exploded in the mouth. But the wooden dragon did not suffer the slightest damage. It was just at the bow of the battle pirates, staring at the warship a little far away. And on the warship, several bodyguards in black suits who served as Celestial Dragon's bodyguards. After seeing this sudden scene, they were all shocked to the point of stagnation, and said in horror, "This is an ability user. Devil Fruit's ability." Looking at the huge wooden dragon, I felt a powerful sense of oppression that was extremely deterrent. A few bodyguards in black realized it. The guys they face this time will no longer be as easy to handle as before. If it goes wrong, it will even cost them a heavy price with their lives. A thought arose in their hearts, and the bodyguards in black did not dare to slack off in the slightest. They set off together, ran to the front of the three celestial dragons, and protected the celestial dragons behind them. Whizzing. It was also after the bodyguard entered his field of vision. The three celestial dragons came back to their senses abruptly. Immediately afterwards, they all showed panic on their faces, subconsciously took a step back, and said with trembling voices, "Then, what is that?" In the next second, celestial dragons suddenly realized their gaffe. You actually retreated, scared, the dignified nobles of the world, celestial dragons, gods. Are you afraid of the noise made by a group of untouchables? Thinking of this, the three Ming celestial dragons became furious almost at the same time. Asshole, it's just a mere pariah, how dare you run into us? You guys, I order you now, immediately bring those pirates to me for atonement. At the end of the conversation, two male celestial dragons almost pointed at the bodyguard in black and roared out. Watch the enraged celestial dragons. A group of bodyguards in black also lowered their heads in panic and responded in a low voice. Please calm down, these untouchables seem to be a little unusual, with demon fruit power on them. So, I hope you can give us some more time, we will definitely bring these despicable pirates who don't know how to behave, to you to make atonement. Celestial Dragon's anger eased a bit. The emotions of anger and embarrassment dissipated slightly. The female celestial dragons took a step at this time, looked at the black-clothed bodyguard and said coldly, 20 minutes. No, I only give you 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, I want to see those pirates kneeling in front of me. Yes, the bodyguard in black replied in a deep voice. However, although the black-clothed bodyguard deserves to be relaxed, he knows it in his heart. The pirates encountered this time are not so easy to deal with. Ships that encountered the world government did not flee or speak, and even dared to fight back and fight back. Except for those maritime overlords who dominate one side, on this grand line, few people dare to do this. At the same time, captain of the battle pirates, the hungry wolf came to the bow full of fighting spirit, and said excitedly, Captain, should we return the salute? Jang J nodded slightly, and replied in a deep voice, Go. As soon as these words came out, the hungry wolf stopped for a moment. I saw him grinning, then leapt forward, using the wooden dragon as a pedal, and leapt directly towards the warship that was a little farther away. Whoosh! Looking at the amazing explosive power displayed by the hungry wolf. Originally, she had always looked dull, until Madara used the wooden dragon technique to relieve Fina. At this moment, Zane also couldn't suppress the horror in Nai's heart, covered his mouth and shouted, Brother Hungry Wolf. Immediately afterwards, Obito also took action. I saw him walking slowly, and greeted Jang J in a calm and cold tone. I'll go and come back. After all, Obito's figure slowly sank into the void and disappeared completely. Fina, who witnessed all this with her own eyes, widened her eyes in shock. Brother Obito, Luchini, Augustus and Jara. I was also taken aback by Obito's sudden display of abilities. Am I disappeared? Is he stepping into the void? This. How is this possible? Same moment. On the warship. Looking a little far away, the hungry wolf leaping at an extremely fast speed, and the black-clothed bodyguard standing in front of the celestial dragons. Immediately, the pupils that were frightened closed, and he let out a voice because of shock. Is that a lie? What kind of explosive power is this? He can leap over such a long distance. It took only a few words from the man in black, and the figure of the hungry wolf leapt in front of him. What are you talking about? I didn't catch it. Between the words, Hungry Wolf took advantage of his strength to split his legs and knock him down. Shua. The terrifying explosive power caused the calf to explode in the air. The bodyguard in black hurriedly crossed his hands to resist. Iron. Before the black-clothed bodyguard's defense was fully deployed, Hungry Wolf's split leg hit him hard. Boom, boom. Following a series of loud noises, the bodyguard in black was nailed into the deck by the Hungry Wolf like a nail. Boom. Seeing this, the two bodyguards in black were shocked. But the movements of his hands were unambiguous. Chi-Chi rushed towards the Hungry Wolf, and without saying a word, he clenched his fist and hit the Hungry Wolf's head. Shua, Shua. The sandbag-sized fist roared with the sound of piercing through the air. Hungry Wolf raised his hands abruptly, and respectively received the fists thrown by the two bodyguards in black. Boom. His fist hit the palm of Hungry Wolf, and he was held tightly by Hungry Wolf. Seeing this, the pupils of the two bodyguards shrank, and they were shocked. Then he was about to raise his other hand to attack the Hungry Wolf. But the Hungry Wolf moved faster than them. At the moment when they haven't raised their hands, the Hungry Wolf grabbed the fists of the two of them and yanked them in front of him. Whoosh! The two bodyguards in black immediately lost their center of gravity and were dragged forward. The Hungry Wolf took another step at the same instant. He charged up his whip leg and kicked the two of them. Boom! Ahem! Bright red blood was coughed up from the mouths of the two bodyguards in black. They also flew upside down like meteors, crashing heavily into the wooden wall of the warship. Boom! 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 Same moment, Obito's figure slowly rose from the deck in front of the celestial dragons. 3 celestial dragons saw this. All of them were frightened, their breathing stagnated, and their pupils trembled violently. They still haven't realized what happened. Whether it was the sudden arrival of the Hungry Wolf or the sudden appearance of Obito, all of these came too fast. His 3 bodyguards had just been killed, and before they realized what was going on, Obito appeared right in front of them. A mere pariah dares to stand in front of me. A celestial dragons located near Obito reacted first, roaring at Obito in shock and anger. But Obito, don't listen to his nonsense. With a move of his hand, a foot-long wooden thorn landed in his palm. In the next second, it was also when celestial dragons spoke the second sentence. Obito held the wooden spike and stabbed directly at the chest of the celestial dragons. I am the world's most expensive. Shish. There was a tearing sound. Before celestial dragons finished speaking, Obito's chest was pierced. The dark red blood flowed down along the tips of the wooden thorns. Puff. Celestial dragons spat out a mouthful of dark red blood. Wow. Blood spilled on the ground. Celestial dragons looked at the wooden thorn that pierced his chest, and at Obito wearing the white mask. His eyes were full of disbelief. I am the noble of the world, celestial dragons. How dare you? Coincidentally, before celestial dragons finished speaking again, Obito's low voice came out slowly. Cutting technique. Quote, Puff. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.